Chapter 564. Hua Xia's 7 Addicts. Fang Ying stared at Hou Zhendong, the martial addict, and shook his head. They don't look alike. What do you think he should look like? Fang Yan snappily asked. What era is it now? Does this guy still judge a book by its cover? Does he have to look like me to become a martial arts master? Does he have to look like Bai Xiu to become a rising star in Neijiang? This doesn't make sense. A strange person with a strange appearance. What kind of strange person is he? He's Hua Xia's 7 Addicts, a legendary figure. Even if he's not as handsome and elegant as Junior Martial Uncle, there's no need to look like an overfed middle-aged uncle. I can't accept it. I can't accept it at all. We, the people of the Appearance Association, have a strict and persistent pursuit of beauty. We like all beautiful things, like handsome men and beautiful women. The martial addict in my heart is not like this. Fang Yan couldn't understand. How could Fang Ying so easily say something like, we in the Appearance Association? Does he not look at himself in the mirror? If he did, how could he live such a carefree, innocent, lively, and simple-minded life? 9 feet tall, jade face, long robe, holding a red tasseled spear made of dragon scale stone, or a startling rainbow sword made by Master Wu Yazi. His long hair draped over his shoulders, his long robe flapping noisily in the wind. Just by standing there, he exudes a supreme majesty that can drive away wolves and tigers. This is the martial arts fanatic of the 7 fanatics of China. Fang Ying looked at Hou Zhendong with a wronged expression, feeling like his idol had been shattered. How can he be like this? How can he be like this? Is he worthy of the title martial addict? Fang Yan was a little regretful for saving him just now. It would have been great if Hou Zhendong's cracking technique directly killed him. The martial addict laughed and pointed at Fang Ying. This boy is simple and cute. Who is he to you? My martial nephew, Fang Yan said. Martial nephew? The martial addict asked in confusion. Who is your master? Azure Dragon, don't underestimate your enemy. What a pity, the martial addict sighed and looked at Fang Ying as if he was looking at a 1,000-year-old treasure. It's not a pity, it's not a pity. Fang Yan hurriedly said, Senior, if you like it, feel free to take it away. I can still make the decision on this matter. I only hope that Senior doesn't find trouble with me and I will be eternally grateful. A gentleman doesn't take what others like. The martial addict declined. Not good. Not good at all. No one likes him, you can just take him. Fang Yan said with endless hidden bitterness. Besides, what kind of gentleman are you? The martial addict stared at Fang Yan with a strange smile and said, You have insulted me. All the more reason for you to accept my challenge. Fang Yan boy, tonight at 8 o'clock at the summit of the One-Sword Mountain, I will fight you to the death. Senior, don't be like this. Aren't you forcing us to buy and sell? If you still feel angry, you can scold me again, then it's settled. The martial addict Hou Zhendong interrupted Fang Yan, looked at Fang Yan and said, Boy, if you don't come tonight, my cracking turtle technique won't only be used on that little fatso. His line of sight passed through the door and looked at Lu Chaoga who was standing under the eaves of the corridor, looking outside. He said, Hiding a beauty in a golden house, what a heavenly life. But, if the beauty gets hurt by someone, it wouldn't be pretty, would it? Is this a threat? Think what you want, the martial addict casually said. He put his hands in his pockets and staggered outside like a loafer. He was even singing some strange lyrics, persuading the king to drink wine and listen to the song of Yu, dispelling the king's sorrows and dancing. In Qin's tyranny broke the country, heroes rose up to fight. Since ancient times, the saying doesn't lie. Success or failure, rise or fall in a split second. How about drinking wine and listening to the military report? Fang Yan listened carefully. It was a passage from Farewell My Concubine. Fang Yan spat on the ground. How unlucky, Fang Ying and Qining walked in front of Fang Yan. Fang Ying asked, Junior Martial Uncle, is he really a martial addict? Fang Yan used the tip of his foot to point at the crack on the ground and said, Do you think a person can make the ground shake like this just by stomping their feet? Then why do you want me to go with him? Fong Yingying angrily asked. I'm not afraid of a godlike opponent, but I'm afraid of a pig-like teammate. He's been pestering me for a long time, wanting me to fight with him. I've rejected him so many times, but you're the one who messed things up. If you go with him, it'll save me a lot of trouble. Junior Marshal Uncle, why don't you want to fight with him? Fong Yingying asked. Why should I fight with him? Fong Yen asked in return. Isn't it natural for us martial artists to spar and learn from each other to improve together? Fong Yingying asked. Let go of victory and defeat, let go of honor and disgrace. Don't be arrogant if you win, don't be angry if you lose. Isn't that what we should do? Fong Yen looked at Fong Yingying with a surprised expression and said, I didn't think you could say something like that. You've really matured a lot. How about you go and fight with the martial addict for me tonight? Fong Yingying desperately shook his chubby head, saying, No, I can't. If I go, I'll be beaten half to death by the martial addict. At that time, I'll be losing face for Shifu and Junior Martial Uncle. Didn't you say to let go of victory and defeat, honor and disgrace? Now you're afraid of losing face? I'm asking others to let go. Don't those old monks always ask others to let go? While I'm sitting in the heart of Buddha, Qin Ning stared at the martial addict's back for a long time, then asked, Is this the strongest expert of the martial world? You can say so. Fong Yen smiled and said, The martial addict, one of the 7 addicts of Hua Xia. If he wasn't obsessed with martial arts, how could he obtain such a title? Qin Ning sighed deeply, saying, The road ahead is long. Fong Yen patted his shoulder, saying, We will continue to search from top to bottom. There are no cliffs in the path of martial arts, let's cherish it as we go. When Fong Yen returned to the courtyard, Lu Chaoga showed a worried expression and asked, Are you all right? I'm fine, Fong Yen smiled and said. An old friend, he came here to find me for a fight. But I refused. Lu Chaoga nodded, then softly asked, What do you want to eat? Because there were often street racers racing on Single Sword Mountain. 2 years ago, there was an extremely serious traffic accident. 2 luxury cars collided at the same time at a curve and rolled into a cliff by the side of the road, destroying the cars and killing the people inside. Because the cars caught fire and exploded in the process of falling off the cliff, when the rescue team found the wreckage of the cars, the people inside the cars had already been burnt to a crisp. The owners of the 2 luxury cars both had powerful backgrounds, so when their relatives cried bitterly, they naturally vented their anger on the administrative department of Flower City. It was said that because of this incident, the head and deputy head of the Department of Traffic at that time were both removed from their positions, and a large number of the higher-ups under them were investigated. The government of Flower City was also quite wronged. If your son wanted to race, who could stop him? Besides, even if they didn't race on Single Sword Mountain, they would still go to Double Sword Mountain, 3 Sword Mountain, 4 Sword Mountain, and Heaven Sword Mountain. Who knew when something would happen? In order to vent their anger, the government of Flower City ordered people to set up several huge stone roadblocks at the entrance of the mountain. Cars couldn't be driven up, so anyone who wanted to go up the mountain could only walk. Who did Single Sword Mountain offend? This method was indeed barbaric and effective. Single Sword Mountain's racing program every night was cancelled, and those street racers went to harm other cities and mountains. The Volkswagen stopped at the foot of the mountain, and Fong Yen opened the door and got out. After the Snake Lord parked the car, he quietly followed behind Fong Yen. His walking posture was very strange. He always touched the ground with his toes first, and his heels almost didn't touch the ground. Because of this, he almost didn't make any sound when he walked. He was like a venomous snake slithering in the grass. You don't have to follow me, Fong Yen said without turning his head. The Snake Lord didn't reply. His figure flashed and disappeared into the grass behind Fong Yen. The Snake Lord should live in the dark like a snake. When he discovered the enemy, he should suddenly jump out and give the enemy a fatal blow. Fong Yen still decided to accept the challenge of the martial arts fanatic. It wasn't for winning or losing, and he wasn't worried about honor or disgrace. That was completely bullshit. He was here to win. Who didn't want to win? He understood the martial arts fanatic. Since the martial arts fanatic was a fanatic, it proved that he was willing to do anything for the sake of martial arts. When he took the boat down the Pearl River, He used the witness to test his strength. When he said that it would be harmful to Lu Chaoge, he wasn't just saying it. Fang Yan wasn't afraid of the martial arts fanatic, but he was afraid of trouble. He didn't want the martial arts fanatic to follow him like a ghost, and there was no better way to solve it other than to beat him down and make him surrender. Fang Yan sneaked out and didn't let Fang Yingying and Qi Ning know. In order not to worry Lu Chaoge, he didn't even drive the BMW at home. Fang Yan was very familiar with the destination, so he passed through the dark mountain forest with ease. 3 years ago, he fought with the Japanese sword god, Chiba Bin, at the top of the One-Sword Peak. That battle made him famous in Jianghu, and it also changed his relationship with Chiba Bin, who was both an enemy and a friend. However, he didn't expect that Chiba Bin would choose to end his life in such a decisive way. He chose to leave when he was at the peak of his martial arts, and became a god in the eyes of the Japanese swordsmen. For 3 years, Fang Yan hadn't been here. However, he didn't forget this place at all. When Fang Yan arrived at the top of the One-Sword Peak, a man in a black robe was already standing there with a smile, like an uncle next door who came out for a stroll after a meal. When the martial arts fanatic saw Fang Yan coming out, he grinned and said, "I knew you'd come. Because there's hatred in your eyes that can't be suppressed." The martial arts fanatic said in a clear voice, "Fang Yan, no matter who you hate, take it out on me tonight." Fang Yan wanted to turn around and run. Why did this middle-aged man always sound so wretched when he spoke? Chapter 565. Tonight, I will vent all my hatred on you? Are you a beauty? Fang Yan only wanted to say one word to the martial fanatic: dream on. Fang Yan had fought against the Japanese sword god, and when the battle was about to end, he suffered a tragic attack. Because the enemy's artillery was too fierce, the top of One-Sword Peak was almost flattened. 3 years had passed, and the hillside was still flat, but the burnt grass had once again sprouted, and the burnt branches had once again grown new trunks. They grew vigorously, as if they were humans. With the grass and branches on the peak, there was not much change compared to 3 years ago, but the people were no longer the old friends from 3 years ago. The soul of Chiba Bing returned to heaven, and was he still practicing swordsmanship every day? Fang Yan knew that there was too much resentment hidden in his heart, and that there was too much hostility in his body. He was gentle and courteous, and welcomed people with a smile. But when would he be able to avenge his father's murder? When would the murderer receive the punishment he deserved? Every night before he went to sleep, he would blame himself for letting the bad guy live one more day. Therefore, Lu Chaoge could see the anger in his heart, and the martial fanatic Hou Zhendong could see the murderous intent in his heart. Murderous intent could also be turned into fighting spirit, into the courage to fight in the face of death. He was a refined gentleman with extraordinary taste in clothes, but he was also a gloomy and ruthless beast that could tear a human apart at any time. The English poet Siegfried Sassoon once wrote this immortal epigram: "In my heart, there is a tiger sniffing the rose." In the depths of everyone's heart, there is a tiger living, but outside the tiger's den, there are still roses growing. Rosefinch Secondary was Fang Yan's rose, Lu Chaoge was Fang Yan's rose, and everything beautiful and peaceful was Fang Yan's rose garden. However, a tiger was a tiger after all, and how could a tiger not want to fight? How could it not eat people? He wanted to fight. He wanted to fight more than anyone else. Since even Lu Chaoge could see it, Hou Zhendong, the martial arts fanatic, did not find it strange at all when he saw Fang Yan. He looked at the martial addict with a smile and said, "Therefore, I have to thank you for giving me such a chance to vent my anger. I like to fight with angry people." The martial addict said, "Because only angry people will disregard everything. At that time, you will truly understand the preciousness of life, live or die. You are a philosopher. Every madman has the potential to become a philosopher. Those who like me call me martial fanatic, and those who don't like me call me martial madman," martial fanatic said with a smile. He glanced around and said, "It's dark and there are only a few spectators." There was no heated discussion in the city, no tens of thousands of people watching, no cheers, and no applause. Compared to the battle between you and the Japanese sword god Chiba 3 years ago, It was too simple and shabby. Do you feel very disappointed? I'm a warrior, not an actor, Fang Yan said. The fewer the people, the better, that way we can fight to our heart's content. That's exactly what I want. The martial addict clapped. Fighting is a matter between two people. What's the point of having a bunch of useless people chatter on the side? Before the martial addict finished, he raised his right foot and stomped down on a rock on the ground. Bam! The top of the hard rock was stomped into a deep groove. The rock inside the groove had already turned to dust when he exerted force. Rumble! A strong airflow gushed out and headed in Fang Yan's direction. Wherever the air current passed, a deep crack appeared. The grass and rocks that came into contact with the air current either broke in half or crumbled into pieces. As if the air current had eyes, it followed the direction where Fang Yan was standing. As Fang Yan retreated, it continued to chase. As Fang Yan continued to retreat, it continued to chase. The air current was strong and fierce, as if there was no end to it. As Fang Yan took a step to the side, the martial addict stomped his foot. A second powerful air current shamelessly rushed towards him. Chi chi chi. The air current screeched, giving off the sound of a sharp blade cutting through flesh. Rumble. It was as if there was a fire dragon flying underground, tearing holes in the hard ground one after another. Fang Yan had nowhere to hide. As he retreated, he pushed off the ground with the tip of his toes and leaped into the air. The martial addict was overjoyed, shouting, "Brat, you've been tricked." While saying so, he punched with both fists. Boom, boom, boom. The martial addict threw over a dozen punches in a single breath. A dozen blades of air appeared in the sky. The dozen blades of air were raised up high, as if a dozen giants were controlling them, giving off a blinding light in the darkness of the night. They either slashed horizontally or vertically, forming an impenetrable wall of lightning. Like a thunderbolt, it flew towards Fang Yan. Even the air itself was being burned by it. Cracking cart. The air current was like a tortoise's shell, creating countless cracks. Every crack carried a powerful force that attacked all the creatures the cracks could reach. What was different was that the patterns on the tortoise's back were messy and there were many of them. The air current was scattered, making it hard to form a dragon. But the martial addict's cracking cart could not only combine the air current into one, it could also transform into a dragon, killing without leaving a trace. The cracking cart was inspired by the #1 assassin of the Qin dynasty, Guiyuan Tang, who saw a tortoise drying its shell 1,000 years ago. He combined it with his family's origin-returning Qi scripture to create this more lethal cracking cart. The cracking cart relied on the air current to kill, first injuring the internal organs, then showing signs on the skin. For example, the skin would break or the pores would bleed. The Guiyuan Tang used this technique to kill countless people, striking fear into everyone's hearts. This technique was also called King of Hell's Foot. If King of Hell wants you dead at midnight, who would dare to keep you alive until midnight? The Guiyuan Tang was later hired by Chu's wealthiest merchant, Chu Mo, to assassinate the King of Qin, but was killed by the King of Qin's generals, Wang Jian and his son. The King of Qin was furious and ordered for the Guiyuan clan to be executed. In the end, the Guiyuan clan disappeared overnight, without a trace. The cracking cart was lost from then on. But no one knew how the martial addict, Hou Zhendong, inherited this technique. When he became famous, the name of the cracking cart was once again known to the world. Once, when Fang Yan was drinking with the old drunkard, Mo Qingdi, the old drunkard commented on all the techniques in the world, especially telling Fang Yan about the cracking cart's origins and its various mystical aspects. He also reminded Fang Yan that if he encountered an expert with the cracking cart, he must not fly into the air. At that time, Fang Yan thought it was strange. Cracking cart was mainly used for ground attacks. Yet the old drunkard did not allow Fang Yan to fly into the air. Wasn't he just standing there and letting others crack him? How could there be such a thing in the world? Now Fang Yan understood, cracking cart can not only be used with the feet, it can also be used with the fists. Comparatively speaking, the frequency of using the earth fisher technique to attack with the strength of his feet was far inferior to that of using his fists. Fang Yan and the martial addict met 3 times. He saw him use fairy flowers, once, and cracking cart, twice. Those 2 times made Fang Yen think that he was showing off his strength. Only now did Fang Yen realize that he was actually hiding his strength. Every time he used his feet to perform the crack technique, it would create a cognitive memory in the minds of others. It would make them subconsciously think that he only used his feet to perform this ultimate technique, and they only needed to be wary of his feet. This sly old dog. Fang Yen cursed in his mind. He suspected that the reason why the martial addict went to find him this afternoon was partly to urge him to attend the banquet tonight, but also to continue to numb him. What the hell? Fang Yan's body flew into the air. His old strength has been used up, but new strength has not been generated. Without any strength to support himself, his body can only fall. But if he falls, he will be cut in half by the cracking cart below. The Taiji heart spun madly. The state of Taiji was fully activated. In Fang Yan's mind, the crisscrossing blades of qi turned into dozens of flickering red lines. They sealed off all the routes that Fang Yan could take to move forward, backward, left, or right. Fang Yan was like a sparrow caught in an electric net. When the net came down on him, his body would be riddled with holes, and the blades of qi would cut him into pieces. Of course, he couldn't just sit and wait for death. Fang Yan's body made a 360-degree turn in the air. His feet used the triangular plum blossom steps in the air. As long as he used the steps, his body would be able to stay in the air. His right hand swung out, drawing one arc after another in the air. Taiji horsetail whisk. He wanted to sweep away the blades of qi like how he would sweep away a horsetail whisk. His palms smoothly reached into the gap between the crisscrossing blades of qi. When he stirred and tried to stir the clouds, countless enormous streams of air suddenly gathered towards his arm. The wind howled. Not good, Fang Yan panicked. Blade array. This is the cracking cart, blade array. The martial addict casually threw a dozen punches and created a dozen or so qi blades. The dozen or so qi blades formed a saber array that was balanced internally. Fang Yan's hand reached in, wanting to wipe out the blades of qi. But he didn't know that his action broke the internal balance of the blade array, drawing all the air currents towards his body. Fang Yan felt a burning pain in his arm. He wanted to pull his hand out of the blade array, but it was already too late. His sleeves caught fire, and the flames spread to his upper body with a whoosh. Boom! With a loud explosion, Fang Yan's body flew backwards. Like a wild bird without a home, like a duck with a broken string. Crack! His body landed heavily on the hard, uneven ground. Countless weeds and branches were flattened by him, and his body slid on the slippery grassland. Clang! His head hit the hard rock, and only then did he avoid sliding into the bottomless abyss of One Sword Peak. Chapter 566. There was no moon in the sky, but there was a star in the distant sky. The star was sitting in the corner of the dark sky, lonely like the Snake Lord at this time. The Snake Lord was lying on a flat rock, looking at the star in boredom. Because apart from that star, he really did not know what else to see. The mountain was black, the trees were black, everything in front of him was black. The Snake Lord actually liked colors. Even when he raised snakes, he liked to raise those colorful poisonous snakes, such as dark red or purple. Because his sister said that the poisonous snakes of that color looked very naughty. Yes, naughty. Although he didn't know what naughty was. Maybe it was naughty when he came back from the mountain and walked into his dilapidated courtyard, when his sister suddenly jumped from behind and blindfolded him to let him guess who she was. Other than that, he really didn't know what other people and things around him were related to these two words. His life was boring and monotonous, and the only color was his sister. Unfortunately, where was she now? The Snake Lord didn't go to see the duel between Fang Yan and the martial arts addict, even though he was very interested in it. However, since Fang Yan didn't let him follow, and since he felt that he should hide in the dark and become a poisonous snake that could jump out at any time to devour those conspirators and evildoers, then he would be a poisonous snake dutifully. Who asked him to lose an eye? Who asked him to hold onto his snake eye? The Snake Lord felt very lonely. Whether it was killing people or being chased, he felt that there was no highlight in life. He missed his sister very much. He and his sister often didn't talk for a whole day, but as long as he could see her, he felt that life was very full and perfect. Crack, crack. The sound of something rubbing against the grass reached his ears. Was it a rabbit that accidentally broke in, or a gray bird that liked to get close to people and cause trouble, or his old friend, a bamboo snake? The snake lord listened carefully and then confirmed one thing. It was a poisonous snake, because he smelled the unique cool stench of a poisonous snake. And the rhythm of its movement was exactly the same as the way a poisonous snake moved when it swung its tail. Whoosh! A green striped object leaped up and pounced towards his face. The snake lord lay there motionless. He didn't dodge or even reach out to grab the snake lord. Sure enough, this was the most commonly seen bamboo snake in the forest. Agile and slightly poisonous. Once the poisonous fangs are pulled out, they can become an edible delicacy. Of course, the Snake King never ate snakes. Just like how humans don't eat humans. He was the king of snakes. How could he eat his own people? The Snake Lord could see the bamboo snake's body, the outline of its head, its cold eyes, and its slightly open mouth. The Snake Lord opened his mouth. When the bamboo snake saw a hole to crawl into, it immediately rushed towards the Snake Lord's slightly open mouth. Ka! The Snake Lord closed his mouth. Then, the head of the bamboo leaf snake was swallowed into his mouth, and its tail struggled desperately outside his mouth. His teeth just happened to bite on the bamboo leaf's 7 inches. He didn't use any strength to avoid biting off the head of the bamboo leaf snake. He was not careless either, in case the bamboo leaf snake suddenly escaped or burrowed into his stomach. Just the right amount of force. Slap, slap, slap. The snake swung its body with all its might. Its tail slapped the Snake Lord's face, forehead, and body again and again. It felt fear. The aura of this person made it feel close and dangerous. The Snake Lord still lay there motionlessly, letting the bamboo leaf snake hit him. He liked this game. He used to play it when he was with his sister. At this moment, the faint starlight overhead was covered, and a black figure appeared on the big rock that the Snake Lord was lying on. The Snake Lord stared at the black shadow in front of him. Because he was so obsessed, he forgot that there was a bamboo leaf snake in his mouth. Whoosh! The bamboo leaf snake exerted force and smoothly burrowed into the Snake Lord's stomach through his throat. The Snake Lord was still unmoved. He stared at the black shadow as if he was possessed. The long black hair, the thin cheeks, and the pupils that were brighter than the stars in the sky. There was also the crescent mark on her forehead. When she first started raising snakes, a poisonous snake jumped out of its nest and bit her between the eyebrows. In a panic, she stretched out her hand to pull the snake's tail out. In the end, she tore off a piece of flesh between her eyebrows. This incident had always troubled him, and he felt very guilty about his sister. If he hadn't been so reckless, his sister would have been even more beautiful. Of course, his sister was now like a fairy. "Sister?" the Snake Lord asked in a hoarse voice. His eyes were wet and his throat was blocked. He was like a child who had been wronged and didn't know how to complain to his elders. Although he was his sister's brother, it was always the older brother who took care of his sister in daily life. "You still like to play this game?" the black shadow said softly. "I like it," the Snake Lord said. "I only know how to play this game. Every time I miss you, I play this game. I was the one who let that snake out. And here I was wondering why it was so bold. Normal poisonous snakes wouldn't dare to come close to me," the Snake Lord said with a proud expression. "I've met Shifu. He personally crowned me as the new Snake Lord. When you weren't here, I was already a true Snake Lord. You've already been a true Snake Lord," the Black Shadow said. "In my heart, you've always been the best snake breeder. It's not the same." "This is not the same," the Snake Lord shook his head. The Snake Lord's bloodline is passed down from generation to generation. Only when the old Snake Lord is crowned can I become the new Snake Lord. "Sister, when I die, I'll crown you as the new Snake Lord." "No, you can be the Snake Lord whenever you want." "I can crown you as the Snake Lord right now." The Snake Lord jumped up from the rock and said, "Come, sister, I'll crown you as the new Snake Lord. I'm willing to give the position of Snake Lord to you." The Black Shadow shook his head and said, "I don't want to be the Snake Lord. I only want to be the Snake Lord's little sister." the Snake Lord opened his mouth wide and smiled. His ugly face gave off the impression of being honest and sincere. The black shadow lightly stroked the Snake Lord's missing eye socket and sighed. "Big brother, did you also offer the Snake Lord's eye to someone else?" "It's fine," the Snake Lord replied with a smile. "At the time, I almost died, but I couldn't stop worrying. I didn't know how you were, I didn't know if you were still alive, I couldn't accept it, but now that I see you again, I know how correct my choice was. Fortunately, I offered my Snake Lord's eye, otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to see you again. What about Shifu? Is Shifu dead?" "Yes, Shifu is dead. He gave the Snake Lord's eye to someone else, as well as his life to his master. This is the fate of snake slaves. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see Shifu again. I didn't get to see him one last time. Big brother, what are you doing here?" "I'm here to watch over him." "Watch over what?" "Watch over my master. The master I offered the Snake Lord's eye to. He's fighting with a very powerful expert. I want to be there to protect him so that he doesn't get killed. Because if he dies, I won't be able to live either. If I die, I won't be able to see you again." The Snake Lord grinned, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth. "I didn't expect to see you here. Even if I die now, I won't have any regrets. Big brother." The black shadow reached out and hugged the Snake Lord, who was standing there like a fool. "Big brother, I'm not dead. You can't die either. How can I die?" "I won't die. Let's go back to Xiangxi together. We'll hide in the mountains and never come out again. The people outside are too scary, even scarier than the venomous snakes we raised." The Snake Lord's body tensed up. This hug made him feel a bit strange. In the past, when he hugged his sister, his body would always be very relaxed, and even his breathing would be very calm and steady. They were like the closest family in the world. Who would have any thoughts other than kinship toward their sister? But now, the Snake Lord was very nervous. His heart was beating very fast. He felt that something was different from before, but he didn't know what was different. Perhaps it had been a long time since they last met, or perhaps it had been a long time since they hugged. The Snake Lord seemed to have remembered something and asked, "Right, little sister, are you all right? Did they make things difficult for you? How did you escape?" "I'm fine," the black shadow said. "Big brother, I'm fine, I'm living very well." "That's good." The Snake Lord grinned like a big toad that was moving its mouth. "It's good that you're fine, little sister, it's good that you're fine. Hurry up and go back. Go back immediately." "Big brother, I can't go back." "Why can't you go back?" the Snake Lord asked. "Hurry up and go back. Go back to Xiangxi and wait for me there. I'll take back my Snake Lord's eye and go back to Xiangxi to find you. Don't let them catch you again, they'll definitely come out to find you." "Big brother, they won't find me." "Why?" "Because, in a place where the Snake Lord couldn't see, a silver poisonous needle appeared between the black shadow's fingers. The black shadow hugged the Snake Lord tightly with one arm, while the other hand stabbed the needle into the Snake Lord's neck. The Snake Lord's body trembled violently, then his consciousness became hazy. His body softly lay in the black shadow's arms, trying to open his eyes, but his eyelids were trembling and he couldn't do anything. He really wanted to open his eyes to take a good look at his sister, to see this unbelievable scene, because he used too much strength. Blood seeped out of his eyes. "Little sister," he called out weakly. Chapter 567. Pain. A tearing pain. Fang Yen touched his head with his hand. There was a large amount of sticky liquid on his palm. Just as Fang Yen had expected, his head was broken and he was bleeding. Smart people were cool like this. Everything was within their calculations, including being beaten like a dog. Fang Yen quickly touched his face again. The red liquid on his hands stained his face. This made it impossible for him to tell if his face was injured or not. "I hope I'm not disfigured," Fang Yen prayed in his heart. He supported himself with one hand, and his body leaped straight into the air. When he fell, he was already on his toes. Hou Zhendong, the martial fanatic, did not follow up with another attack. He stood still and looked at Fang Yen, saying, "Kid, you're too careless." Fang Yen nodded, saying, "Indeed, I was too careless. You're very strong, much stronger than I thought." The martial fanatic smiled, saying, "You're not weak either. To be able to take a fatal blow from my saber array without losing an arm or a leg, you can be considered one of the top figures of the younger generation. A man who can fight against Mo Chingdi the Azure Dragon. How could he be a simple man?" The martial fanatic's smile froze. He angrily said, "Bastard kid, what are you saying? Are you praising me or insulting me? What do you mean by a man who can fight against Mo Chingdi the Azure Dragon? How could he be a simple man? Mo Chingdi and I are of the same generation, we're opponents of the same level. Why is it that fighting against him is a great honor? Heroes are gone, masters are hard to find. Do you understand this feeling?" "I do." Fang Yen nodded. "Otherwise, you wouldn't have come to find me. You sure know how to flatter yourself." The martial fanatic smiled. "My cracking technique is not bad, right? The first time I met you, you broke my fairy offering flower, so I wanted to make you suffer. The next few times I met you, I wanted to drag you into a pit. Every time I use my feet, I'll make you lose your ability to judge. You'll think that I only know how to use my feet. I didn't expect you to fall for it. You're not as smart as that little girl said." "Little girl?" Fang Yen was stunned. The martial addict looked at Fang Yen with a resentful expression and said, "You're really cruel and unscrupulous. You've forgotten the old one after you got a new one. The first time we met, you were drinking tea with the girl at the tea house by the Pearl River. It's only been a few days. When I went to look for you today, you were with another girl. Has your conscience been eaten by a dog? Why do you always have such exquisite beauties around you? Where did you find it?" The topic of the martial addict jumped so fast that even Fang Yen found it hard to resist. The martial addict waved his hand dismissively and said, "Living people want to live. I've been obsessed with martial arts for my entire life, and for me, martial arts are the sexiest women. Since you've enjoyed the pleasures of love, then let me also enjoy this boundless spring." You can't help but admire some people's language skills. No matter how serious the topic was when it came out of his mouth, it always made people feel like he had a vulgar and obscene temperament. While Fang Yen was still thinking about what to say to pull this bad atmosphere back to the right path, the martial addict was already very impatient. He didn't seem to take any action, but he lifted his right foot and stomped down. A powerful white stream of air rushed out, like a long white dragon drilling a hole in the hard stone ground. Cha-cha. This was the sound of grass and trees being cut. There was no room for resistance. A long crack appeared on the ground. The long stream of air headed straight for where Fang Yen was standing. After stomping his foot, the martial addict lowered his body and dove towards Fang Yan's direction. He clenched his hands into fists and punched towards Fang Yan's face. Whoosh! A white flash of lightning appeared in front of Fang Yen. Because the night was too dark, and because the lightning was too white, everything within a few meters was illuminated as if it was daytime. Whoosh! Where the lightning flashed, sparks of burning air could be seen. Fang Yan's toes touched the ground, continuously using drunken crane riding the wind's swaying steps, his body continuously retreating. The martial addict took the initiative and attacked. His fist missed, and he punched out again. Whoosh! Another white flash of lightning appeared. The white flash of lightning illuminated the martial addict's cold, serious, almost sinister face. When the martial addict was fighting seriously, he wasn't handsome, but he gave off a masculine vibe. Strange, why would I have such a thought? Fang Yen thought in annoyance. He felt that he had been led astray by the martial addict, and could no longer be a decent handsome man. Fang Yen still used drunken crane riding the wind to dodge, and used unintentional to deal with intentional. The key to drunken crane riding the wind was that as long as it felt the airflow, it would dodge in the opposite direction. Every punch and kick that others threw out was like a gust of wind to him. Good wind, help me ascend to the clouds. Fang Yen couldn't ascend to the clouds, so he continued to move quickly at the top of Solitary Sword Peak. The martial addict's attacks had already formed a formation, and his fists formed a formation. Countless white airflow and lightning exploded in front of him, and countless stars appeared in the air and were destroyed. As a result, his life was short. Bolt after bolt of lightning, countless bolts of lightning crisscrossed and collided, once again brewing into a ball of lightning that looked calm on the outside, but was ruthless on the inside. Once it exploded, it could tear a person to pieces. Fang Yan had already suffered once, so he wouldn't touch those bolts of lightning again. Even if he was very confident in his Taiji heart, even if he could clearly see the lines of each of the martial addict's fists in the Taiji domain, even if he could find the safest gap among those countless red lines, and then put his arm in, but he definitely wouldn't do such a stupid thing again. The martial addict's attacks became faster and faster, and the movements of his fists had already become a blur. The shadows of the fists and the shadows of the lightning intertwined, creating a scene that was both beautiful and dangerous. His body was like an enraged bull, rushing forward with all its might, rumbling and shaking the earth with every step. Fang Yan's small steps also became faster and faster, and finally, Fang Yan's figure also disappeared in the shadows of the fists and the lightning. In close contact, in a face-to-face battle, Fang Yan truly felt the terror of the martial addict. His fists could crack the air, and every step of his feet could similarly crack the earth's crust. In other words, Fang Yan not only had to receive his fists, but also had to be on guard against the endless small movements of his feet. Whether he was hit on the upper body or sneak attacked on the lower body, he would immediately use the cracking technique to crack. Based on Fang Yan's understanding of him, he would definitely be able to do such a thing. Retreat was not Fang Yan's style, but escape. He really wanted to turn around and run down the mountain. That is, if he could run away. Why did he want to fight to the death with this guy for no rhyme or reason? He didn't steal Yiro from him, and he didn't kill his own father. Why did he have to fight like this? Oh, by the way, there was hostility in Fang Yan's heart. Fang Yan decided to release the hostility that had accumulated in his body and almost overflowed. When he thought of this, he had already thought of clenching his fists to fight back. Just when he was about to bite the bullet and punch back, the martial addict punched more than a dozen times in a row, and the dozen punches turned into a dozen lightning. People with profound inner strength were willful. Their punches were like they were free. Fang Yan had no choice but to keep retreating. He kept retreating. However, if he kept retreating, he would be forced to the edge of the cliff by the martial addict. He was getting closer and closer to the cliff, and he could already hear his feet kicking out the stones and rolling down the mountain. There was no way to retreat, so he had to retreat again. According to the way the martial addict attacked, he intended to force Fang Yan off the cliff. Like a storm, like a broken bead curtain. Like a lute being played wildly, like a guitar being played wildly. Martial addict was completely immersed in his own rhythm. When a person did things extremely smoothly, he would have a sense of rhythm. It was like this when he sang, when he typed, and when he fought with others. At this time, even if the martial addict didn't want to kill Fang Yan, he couldn't stop what he was doing. Because it was the most wonderful thing in the world. For the martial addict, it was 1,000,000 times more wonderful than the love between a man and a woman. Cracking skill. Everywhere was cracked. His punches cracked, his kicks cracked, his palms cracked, and he even opened his mouth and roared because he was having too much fun. Their words were like swords and lightning. Ah, the martial addict shouted and screamed. He felt that today's fight was so enjoyable. The feeling of being able to attack and blast as he pleased was simply too comfortable. In the past, when he fought with others, the weak ones fell down in a few punches and kicks. Those who were strong would be knocked down after he bombarded them for a while. Of course, this had never happened before. Only once or twice, or 2 or 3 times. But Fang Yan was different. No matter how much he punched, Fang Yan just calmly retreated. Don't underestimate the word retreat. In the eyes of a true master, retreating was harder than advancing. Because the human body was used to walking forward, it was easy to lose one's footing or get knocked down by an object when retreating. Moreover, under his high rhythm of punching, Fang Yan was still orderly even when retreating and always tried to counterattack. This was very rare and precious. That's great, the martial addict shouted. He wanted to tear off all his clothes and run naked on the top of the mountain. Bah! Fang Yan spat out a mouthful of phlegm. That's great. The martial addict only felt a mouthful of phlegm slipping into his mouth, but before he could react, it had already flowed down. Chapter 568. There was no need for image and no need for quality. For a war, the most important and only factor was winning or losing. Yes, Fang Yen had always been a handsome, aloof, and sunny young man. He never ate leftovers, never wore dirty clothes, and never threw garbage anywhere or spat on the street. As for spitting into someone's mouth, Fang Yen had never even thought about it. It made him feel disgusted. But this was a battle. When Hou Zhendong, the martial maniac, connected his cracking magic kung fu into a formation and set a rhythm, his punches were the most domineering and rhythmic. Even with Fang Yan's strength, he would be at a disadvantage if he continued to fight. Moreover, the cracking magic kung fu had another characteristic, which was that old punches could be connected with new punches, and old forces could be connected with new forces. If it was an ordinary person's kung fu, with one punch the energy would be released. If it didn't hurt anyone or anything, the energy would naturally disappear in the air. But the cracking magic kung fu was different. Their airflow could form lightning, and each single lightning could form a net. They relied on each other and supported each other. It became an independent little world. When an external force or object entered or touched it, it would immediately explode in anger, giving the other party the strongest blow, just like a chaste virgin. Hou Zhendong was able to become one of Hua Xia's 7 martial maniacs, and not Hou Xiaolong or anyone else, so naturally he had something special. He was able to win more than he lost in hundreds of battles, and he was able to fight against Azure Dragon Mo Qingdi at his peak. In Fang Yan's opinion, besides his shameless stalking that made the old drunkard unable to bear it, the most important reason was that there was something about this person that attracted Mo Qingdi. What could a middle-aged fatso have that attracted Mo Qingdi? If it wasn't his body or face, then it could only be his kung fu. And because he had seen the power of the cracking magic kung fu, Fang Yen kept retreating. Fang Yen knew their advantages, and he also knew that he wasn't suitable to fight them head-on. He didn't steal a girl, and he didn't kill his father. Why would he fight to the death? So, Fang Yen needed a chance. It was a chance for him to make a move, a chance for him to counterattack in a desperate situation. He didn't know much about the martial addict and didn't know that he had a bad habit of shouting and screaming when fighting. Didn't he know that it was easy to absorb the fog from the hilltop or the dust from the kicks? Even if he wasn't afraid of this, didn't anyone spit on his face when he fought before? Pay attention to hygiene and start with some small habits. Fang Yen felt that the martial arts fanatic was a man who did not pay much attention to hygiene. The martial addict didn't pay much attention to it at first. He just felt that he had swallowed something like a bug or something else. When he connected the word, pay, that Fang Yen had spat at him, he suddenly felt like he had swallowed a fly. No, he would rather eat 100 flies than eat Fang Yan's saliva. The martial arts fanatic was dumbfounded. His brain short-circuited for a moment. His expression was twisted in pain, and his face was filled with anger. This is too disgusting. How could this guy do such a thing? As he thought of this, a gap immediately appeared in the path of his fist, and an obvious gap appeared in the electric net of lightning. In the blink of an eye, it was seen by Fang Yen. At this time, Fang Yen had already retreated to the edge of the cliff. If he took another step back, his whole body would fall into the endless darkness. Fang Yen finally made his move. His white and slender right hand stretched out, and then stabbed towards the electric net of the cracking magic skill. The skin of his arm was white and tender, and his fingers were slender and flexible. That hand seemed to have eyes, and with a whoosh, it grabbed a handful of lightning. Yes, he grabbed the white lightning formed by the airflow in his hand. The airflow did not dissipate, and the lightning was still flashing with white light. Crackle, crackle, it struggled desperately, twisting. The air around it hissed as it burned. Fine sparks flew one after another, and before you could take a closer look, they disappeared without a trace. Fang Yen grabbed the bolt of lightning in his hand and used it as a guide to spin it 3 times in a counterclockwise manner on the lightning planet. When he pulled his hand out of the lightning star, the lightning ball began to hiss, and the elliptical object turned into a pancake. Like a silver bottle spilling out, like a spear bursting out. Countless strands of lightning stretched out and then retracted in an instant. When they retracted, the pancake lightning suddenly expanded a lot. It was like a shot put suddenly turned into a flying saucer. Boom! The silver lightning balls suddenly exploded. The countless bolts of lightning were like countless silver snakes, roaring and flashing in all directions. For a moment, the sky was bright, and the snakes flew randomly in the sky. The lightning star was the lightning star of the martial addict, and the airflow was also the strength of the martial addict's punch. When the lightning star exploded, the martial addict's body still maintained the inertia of moving forward. Even though he had already reacted quickly, even though he had noticed a flaw in his attack and immediately made up for it. Unfortunately, he was still one step too late. Bang! His body collided with the exploding lightning star, and the explosive force of the lightning star sent his body flying. The cracking qigong formed a natural array, and if there was an array, there must be an array I. If it was in normal times, it would be very difficult for Fang Yan to find where the array I of the cracking qigong was. Besides, even if he found it, there was nothing he could do. Because the martial addict Hou Zhendong's attack was too fierce. If you knew that there was a spirit herb on the cliff, as long as you climbed up, you could pick it, but on the way up, you might encounter a landslide, be covered in ice and snow, and accidentally fall, and be smashed to pieces. Would you still be willing to pick that spirit herb? His mood was naturally contradictory. However, when the martial addict Hou Zhendong swallowed the saliva that Fang Yan had spat out, and when the martial addict's attack showed a flaw because of disgust, the array I was firmly captured by Fang Yan's Tai Chi heart. He operated the Tai Chi domain, skillfully found the array I, and then pulled out the line that ran through the whole supporting array. As a result, the lightning star immediately lost its power and vitality, and the array without a skeleton and soul collapsed in an instant. The airflow lightning in Fang Yan's hand, which was used as the array I, not only did not disappear, but also became thicker and brighter after he poured his strength into it. It was not bound by anything. It was not willing to be in the hands of Fang Yan, not willing to let its fate be controlled by someone else. Fang Yan helped it. When the silver lightning ball exploded, he suddenly threw out the white lightning. The white lightning brought with it countless lightning bolts and attacked the chest of the martial addict Hou Zhendong, who was still flying in the air after being bombarded by the lightning star. At this time, the seriously injured martial addict Wu Zhendong had no time to defend, nor could he defend against Fang Yan's full attack. Zilala, the white lightning hit the martial addict's chest and disappeared, but the speed at which Hou Zhendong flew back increased by several times. Clang, 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 crack. The martial addict's body flew backward for more than 10 meters, knocking down countless rugged rocks and broken wooden stakes. Finally, he crashed into a thick and hard tree before he stopped with difficulty. Silence. A deathly silence. After a long time, the martial addict finally moved. The martial addict shook his head and sat up from the ground with his hands. His face was purplish red, as if he wanted to say something but could not speak. Bang! The martial addict punched himself in the chest. He spat out a mouthful of thick blood, and the abnormal flush on the martial addict's face gradually disappeared. The martial addict took a deep breath, and then climbed up from the ground with one hand on the tree. He walked toward Fang Yan step by step, and then stopped a few meters away from Fang Yan. Pretty boy, the martial addict cursed. But when he thought about it, this was a man who could knock him down, so it was too disrespectful to call him a pretty boy. So, the martial addict changed his words. Fang Yan, you bastard, how could you do such a disgusting thing? Do you have any personal hygiene? Do you have any martial artist's morals? Do you have any demeanor of a master? How did a shameless person like you learn the heart of Tai Chi? How did you become the most outstanding figure of the Tai Chi branch? So what if you beat me? Humiliation, this is the most humiliating thing in the world. Spitting at someone during a fight, this is not only disrespecting your opponent, it is also disrespecting yourself. Whether it's the inner or outer Jianghu, everyone should be ashamed of your behavior. Fang Yan smiled at him and said, when you use all kinds of methods to force others to fight you, have you ever thought about a martial artist's morals? You used a woman's life to threaten me to come here today. Do you have any demeanor of a master? You are one of the 7 addicts of Hua Xia, a famous figure for decades. I only learned a little bit from you. If you don't care about your reputation, why should I? The martial addict was choked by Fang Yan's words. Indeed, in order to force others to fight him, he did a lot of things. Sometimes he even used the lives of other people's family members to threaten him. Although he didn't do anything to those people's family members, his bad reputation still spread. Senior, thank you for letting me win. Fang Yan cupped his hands and said with a smile. The martial addict's face turned green and white. He hesitated for a while, but finally couldn't help but ask, "Are you sick?" Fang Yan wanted to spit at his face again. "You're the one who's sick." Chapter 569. The martial addict's worries were not unfounded. He had just swallowed the phlegm that Fang Yan spat out. If Fang Yan had any infectious diseases like tuberculosis or AIDS, wouldn't he be in trouble as well? Besides, this kid was covered in flowers and leaves. No one would believe him if he said he didn't have AIDS. He felt disgusted to ask such a question, but he was worried if he didn't ask. After hesitating for a long time, he couldn't help but say what he was worried about. "Are you sick?" Fang Yan wasn't sick. Even if he was, it would only be a psychological problem. Fang Yan looked at the martial addict and clasped his hands together, then said, "Senior, you asked me to fight with you at the top of the one-sword peak tonight. Now that I'm here and we've fought, is this the end of the matter? This kid has not learned martial arts for a long time and his kung fu isn't high. Elder, you should find someone more powerful to spar with. Only they can be your real opponent and satisfy your desire to fight." The martial addict was furious. He pointed at Fang Yan and scolded, "Why are you cursing me in a roundabout way? You said you're not learned martial arts for a long time and your kung fu isn't high. How did you send me flying? How did you break my cracking saber array? If you're not learned martial arts, then we deserve to die? Young man, don't be too arrogant, or you'll kick a steel plank." Fang Yan thought about it seriously and said humbly, "Thank you for your reminder, I'll keep your words in mind. If I have the chance to kick a steel plank next time, I'll try my best to kick a hole through it." Fang Yan waved his hand and was about to walk down the mountain. He said, "Elder, it's getting late. My lungs haven't been well lately, so my family made me white fungus and pear porridge. I'm in a hurry to eat a bowl of porridge. Want to run?" The martial addict sneered. "It's just the beginning and you want to go down the mountain already? Isn't it over?" Fang Yan asked in confusion. He had been knocked down by the martial arts fanatic once, and then he had broken his lightning star and knocked him down even more fiercely. Although on the surface, it looked like both sides were injured and both sides had won and lost, there were still some subtle differences. When he fell to the ground, he quickly got up, and it was his head that was bleeding, not his mouth. After the martial addict fell to the ground, he didn't move for a long time. It looked as if he had been killed by Zhang Heng. In the end, he even patted his chest and spat out a mouthful of blood. "No matter how I looked at it, it seemed that I won, right? That was just a warm-up. If a man did not fight to his heart's content and fight to the death, what kind of decisive battle was that? Do you think this is child's play?" Before he finished speaking, he had already started moving. The martial addict's words were loud and vigorous, but when he rushed over, he was silent. This time, the martial addict didn't use the cracking technique. When his feet landed on the ground, there were no more air currents or cracks on the ground. His footsteps were silent, and he left no trace on the snow. His toes touched the ground, and as soon as his toes touched the ground, his whole body jumped high. He was like a balloon filled with air, light and flexible, as if he was walking on the tips of grass and branches. He was a completely different person from the martial arts fanatic who had just punched with thunderclaps and attacked with lightning bolts from his feet. Anyone who saw him would admire this middle-aged man's godlike speed and various difficult movements like a ghost. Soft technique. This time, Fang Yan really respected and admired the martial addict Hou Zhendong. Just as ice and fire could not mix, soft and hard were also natural enemies. The cracking technique belonged to the strongest and most hard kung fu. When it was used, it was like thunder and lightning. He charged towards Fang Yan with the momentum of breaking dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, as if he wanted to crush and destroy all the obstacles in front of him. But the soft technique was the opposite. It looked light and gentle, but it was impossible to guard against and unavoidable. It could easily kill people. The soft technique was not Tai Chi, but it was similar to Tai Chi's 4 liang moving 1,000 jin. For a weapon like a sword, a hard one was not as good as a soft one. 10 years for a hard sword, 30 years for a soft sword. Some people were good at using hard weapons and could use hard weapons to the extreme. For example, Azure Dragon's long spear. Some people were good at using soft weapons and could make soft swords and whips a part of their body. For example, Black Dragon's 100 Ghost Beard and Yi Wen's long whip. But very few people could practice these two weapons or their strength to the extreme at the same time. First, it was too time-consuming, and second, it was necessary to specialize in one to become a god in that field. If he was half-hearted, then he might face a result that would not be pleasing to either side. Others were not willing to do it, but the martial addict did it. Because of his obsession with martial arts, the martial addict was not willing to give up on any opponent, and he was not willing to give up on any kind of attempt. That was why he could be listed as one of Hua Xia's 7 addicts. He was serious because of respect, and cautious because of admiration. Seeing the martial addict's body rushing towards him as if it was floating, Fang Yan's long robe swayed slightly, and he displayed the Fang family's triangular plum blossom steps, taking the initiative to meet the martial addict. As the distance closed, the little dragon catcher hand went to buckle the martial addict's wrist. The martial addict flipped, and Fang Yan buckled again. The martial addict flipped again, and when Fang Yan dodged, he buckled again. There was no sound of airflow, and there was no sword light or shadow. One wanted to buckle the opponent's wrist, and the other wanted to counterattack when he flipped and dodged. If he failed, he buckled again. If he failed again, he buckled again. His wrists flipped, and his fingers moved like lightning. In just a short period of time, they had already exchanged blows 368 times. Every move contained both offensive and defensive movements, and these two movements contained endless variations. This was the simplest duel because it was just the two of them standing there and flipping their hands and feet. This was also the most dangerous duel, because if one was a step slower or accidentally got his hands and feet locked by the other, he would lose all his advantages and face a storm of attacks. The possibility of a one-hit kill was also very high. The martial addict's advantage was that his moves were elegant and his attacks could be said to be unpredictable. Fang Yan's advantage was the help of the Taiji heart. In the Taiji domain, the trajectory of the martial addict's every move was clearly visible. After more than 300 flips and attacks, the martial addict finally became a little impatient. He roared, and his body suddenly floated high up in the air like a balloon. His body spun wildly in the air, and the airflow caused by the rotation turned into a black whirlpool of wind. A strong gust of wind blew and enveloped Fang Yan, who was on the ground. Whoosh! Fang Yan was covered by the tornado, and in an instant, he was in the eye of the storm. His mouth couldn't speak, and his eyes couldn't see. All he could hear was the whooshing sound of the wind, and the indistinguishable wails of ghosts and wolves. Since you don't let me see and don't let me hear, then I might as well not see and not listen. Fang Yan stood still and closed his eyes. Whoosh! A fist suddenly came, aiming straight for Fang Yan's ear. The ear was one of the most vulnerable parts of the human body, and the ear was very close to the temple. With a single punch, his entire head would explode. The fist was hidden in the darkness, and came together with the sound of the wind. It was very difficult for people to notice its existence. However, how could this deceive Fang Yan, who had the Taiji heart? Fang Yan tilted his head, and just happened to avoid the punch. Another kick came toward Fang Yan's groin with the sound of the wind. Fang Yan was furious, and his body moved 3 steps to the side, and just happened to avoid this ruthless attack. Then, an overwhelming barrage of attacks came from all directions. Fang Yan could clearly feel that the martial addict wasn't fighting alone, but there were countless people fighting with him. He wasn't facing a single person but a group of unfathomable evil spirits. Whoosh! As Fang Yan punched out, other than the sound of the wind, there was no other sound. Pretty boy, don't make any useless struggles. This is the cotton art. My heart is cotton, my body is cotton, everything I have is cotton. The cotton is always floating in the wind. The martial addict attacked Fang Yen from all directions, while loudly showing off his unique skill. Save it, I advise you to save your strength. How can you hit the cotton? Before your fist could even reach me, the air current would have already washed the cotton away. Don't you think this move is very familiar? Yes, this is what I learned from Don't Underestimate the Enemy's Drunken Crane Riding the Wind. What kind of enlightenment is that? Fang Yen sneered in his mind. Isn't this obviously plagiarism? Don't you have any shame? Whether it's enlightenment or plagiarism, in any case, this is my cotton art. Drunken Crane Riding the Wind is only a set of footwork, but I've turned it into a set of martial arts. Isn't this my own creation? Don't Underestimate the Enemy is a genius, but he doesn't think about martial arts, and is greedy for the love and affection of the world. If he wholeheartedly pursued Tao, how could he have lost to the dragon god? What a pity! How hateful! Fang Yen didn't say anything, only closed his eyes and focused on feeling it. He felt the all-pervasive punches and kicks, and felt the cracking kung fu that appeared in the tornado from time to time. Yes, the martial addict is a genius in martial arts. Sometimes he's frivolous, sometimes he's tough. He's a cotton, but this cotton is able to use the strongest and toughest cracking art. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, the wind howled. Ayo ayo ayo, ghostly cries and wolf howls. Crack crack crack, this is the cracking art's lightning-like shadow. The martial addict alone can bring about such a huge battle, using 3 different styles of martial arts to duel. Fang Yen felt very wronged. He felt like he was being completely suppressed. Pretty boy, make your move. Make your move. Make your move. Use your most powerful skill. Use the heart of Tai Chi. Let me see how strong you are. Let me see if you are the top expert of Tai Chi. Fang Yen, be angry. Fight with all you have, otherwise you won't have another chance. Clang! Fang Yan's body shot up like an arrow, then threw a punch. It was like a humanoid anti-aircraft gun. The wind stopped, the clouds stopped. The lightning disappeared, the howling of the wolves also disappeared. The martial addict's body flew high into the sky, reaching a height that was hard to see with the naked eye. He's flying so high. Fang Yen looked up, muttering to himself. Chapter 570. Bam! Like a bull falling from the sky, Ho Zhendong's body slammed into the mountain peak. Crack! There was a protruding rock under his body that was crushed by his huge body. Fang Yen could feel the earth trembling, as if the entire sword peak was about to be turned into a sword field. The martial addict laid there motionlessly, his body was surrounded by flying dust. "Senior," Fang Yen called out. No one answered. "Senior, are you all right?" Still no one answered. "Don't tell me he's dead?" Fang Yen frowned. "And he didn't sign a 'I won't take any responsibility if you die' agreement before the fight. If the martial addict really died, wouldn't I have to take responsibility if the police came looking for me? Uncle Police, that man forced me to fight. He used my family to threaten me, and said that if I don't come, he'll harm my girlfriend. I already told him to stop fighting, but he wouldn't let me go, saying that it was only a warm-up. Why is my life so bitter?" Fang Yan's eyes became hot, almost tearing up. "I'm not dead, a hoarse voice came from where the martial addict was lying. The martial addict slowly sat up with his hands on the ground, but he didn't have the strength to get up. His expression was a mess, his face was split open one after another. Blood stained his cheeks, and even his eyes were bloodshot. It wasn't until now that Fang Yen noticed that he was sitting there naked. His clothes had already been burned away during the high-speed rotation, turning into invisible dust. A naked middle-aged man sitting on top of an empty valley. This scene really made people want to turn around and run. The martial addict looked at Fang Yen with a bitter expression and asked, "How did you find me?" "I wanted to find you, so I found you," Fang Yen replied. "Impossible, I hid in the middle of the tornado, my heart was like cotton, my body was also cotton." Fang Yen laughed and said, "You say you are cotton, do you really think you are cotton? I have to admit, your cotton martial art is indeed very powerful. You have reached the pinnacle of using your body and strength. If it was someone who was not up to standard, they would definitely be blasted into smithereens by this move of yours. Cut the crap. The martial addict said, You suddenly punched out. My body hadn't moved to the space above you yet. I only had that thought. How did you know I would get there? I have the heart of Tai Chi, Fang Yan said. The heart of Tai Chi contains the realm of Tai Chi. I've recorded all of your movements and analyzed them. Finally, I found your figure and sent you flying with a punch. That's it? The martial addict asked dejectedly. Who was he? He was the martial arts addict, one of the 7 addicts of Huaxia. He was the best at martial arts among the 7. Of course, the music addict was also the best at music among the 7. The medicine addict was also the best at medical skills among the 7. He knew that Fang Yan was quite strong, otherwise he wouldn't have asked him to spar with him. He also knew that he was quite strong, otherwise, how could he become one of the 7 addicts of Huaxia? There would always be a winner and a loser in a battle, but who would be willing to lose rather than win? There's also the most important point, Fang Yan said. What is it? Talk too much. Fang Yan answered truthfully, When you were fighting me, you kept showing off the origin of your martial arts. I was able to accurately lock onto you based on the position of your voice. Fang Yan looked at the martial addict whose head was covered in blood and said, Senior, thank you for letting me win. Can I go down the mountain now? There really is porridge at home. I need to go back and eat a bowl while it's still hot. The martial addict waved his hand and said, Go, go. I hope you still have the strength to go back and eat a bowl of porridge. Fang Yan smiled and said, I don't have the strength to fight, but I still have the strength to eat porridge. The martial addict coldly smiled as his body weakly laid down on the ground. Seeing the martial addict's weak expression, Fang Yan thought that he was unwilling to lose to him, so he tried to console him. Senior, winning and losing are common in battles. Although I've never lost before, I don't think you should place too much emphasis on winning and losing. If you fall from my hands, you'll have to find your way back from someone else. You're the martial addict? Who are you afraid of? Scram, the martial addict angrily roared. Scram as far as you can? Fang Yan laughed and said, Senior, the wind on the mountain is cold and there are many insects, be careful. Although the martial addict was heavily injured, the wind and insects on the mountain couldn't do anything to him, so Fang Yan calmly walked down the mountain. The martial addict opened his eyes and looked up at the starry sky with a bitter expression and softly said, Brat, I'm sorry. Love will be like a hungry wolf. How can I hug him to sleep? He'll definitely leave me with severe wounds as a souvenir. Love will be like a hungry wolf. His mouth is sweet. If I come closer to play, his ferocious face will appear. Fang Yan was very happy. Fang Yan liked to drink and sing whenever he was happy. His Cantonese wasn't very good, he only started to learn it after he arrived at Huaqing. That's why Heavenly King Zhang's classic Cantonese song, Legend of the Hungry Wolf, was sung by him in Huaxia language. You don't say, it really does have a different kind of unpleasant taste. While singing Legend of the Hungry Wolf, Fang Yan happily walked down the steep mountain path. If someone looked at him from afar, they would definitely think that he was a pervert in heat. As he walked, Fang Yan suddenly remembered something very important. Where's Snake Lord? Fang Yan thought to himself. Although he didn't let the Snake Lord follow him, his intention was to let the Snake Lord protect him in secret. Now that he was safe and sound and had defeated one of the 7 addicts of Huaxia, Hou Zhendong, shouldn't the Snake Lord quickly stand up and flatter him by saying something like, I knew you would win? This child really doesn't know anything. Fang Yan turned around and it was pitch black behind him. If Fang Yan was an ordinary person, he would have already shouted, Snake Lord's name at the top of his lungs. But Fang Yan wasn't an ordinary person, he was a man who defeated the martial addict. Therefore, Fang Yan decided to call the martial addict. Thanks to technology, Fang Yan wanted to take out his phone from his pocket, but he found that his phone had already disappeared. After thinking for a long time, he remembered that he didn't bring his phone with him when he went out. It wasn't the first time he had a duel, and every time after a duel, he would lose a phone. Later, after he gained experience, he didn't take his phone with him when he went out to fight. If the police picked up his phone, wouldn't it prove that he was at the scene of the crime? Besides, he had to spend money to buy a phone. Fang Yen couldn't contact the Snake Lord, so he planned to wait for him at the parking lot at the foot of the mountain. Although he was the master of the Snake Lord was just his snake slave. However, Fang Yen was not a heartless employer. He still cared about the life and death of his follower. Although his follower's mind had never been on his side, he had to work for him because he was forced. Sometimes Fang Yen was really curious about what kind of woman the sister of the Snake Lord was and why she could make the Snake Lord make such a big sacrifice. If she was good-looking, he would go and court her. If she was not good-looking, he would let Fang Yingying court her. In that case, he or Fang Yingying would become the brother-in-law of the Snake Lord. Of course, Fang Yen couldn't do such a thing. He already had a girlfriend, and he couldn't let Yi-Ro down. He didn't dare. She turned off the evening light, covered her shoulders, intertwined sparks, imprisoned in precipitation. Fang Yen sang his Huaxia version of the passionate song again. Clang! The sound of stones rolling came from behind him. Fang Yen turned around as fast as lightning and shouted, "Who is it? Come out!" No one answered, and naturally, no one came out. Fang Yen stood there for a few seconds and said with a sneer, "Come out. Don't hide your head like a turtle. I've already seen you." Crash! The leaves swayed, and a pitch-black figure leaped up from a tree that was as thick as a person. The black shadow landed on the ground without a sound. It seemed that his qinggong was very good. Fang Yen didn't expect that someone would really jump from the tree. He was shocked and shouted, "Come out together, don't hide." Clang! A short old man appeared on top of a large rock. His gaze was as sharp as lightning as it swept across Fang Yen. "Ha, you're a smart one. Even my silkworm detection art couldn't fool you." Another old man jumped up from the tall grass on the side of the road and revealed his small head. Fang Yen opened his mouth wide as he looked at what was happening in front of him. "Isn't this a bit too fucking cooperative? I just randomly shouted, how did you really come out? If I tell you to come out, then you come out. If I tell you to scram, then will you scram?" So, Fang Yen sneered and shouted, "Since you don't want to come out, then don't blame me for not serving you." After saying that, Fang Yen turned around and ran down the one-sword peak. "Didn't we come out?" The small old man sitting in the grass asked with a confused expression. "I've already spoken, how else can I prove that I've come out?" The big old man sitting on top of the large rock sneered and said, "That brat is playing tricks, he's afraid that we'll wrap him up like a dumpling." "Humph." The small old man in the grass snorted and said, "I'm afraid he won't be able to leave one-sword peak tonight." "That's not necessarily true," the man in black with a black veil said with disdain. The two old men, one with a big head and one with a small head, were furious. The small head old man said angrily, "Whose side are you on?" The big old man coldly looked at the man in black and said, "No matter what, this brat is going to die today. Why aren't you going to chase him?" Before he finished speaking, he tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and leaped high up from the boulder. Like a rock spreading its wings, he chased after Fang Yen fiercely. The little old man's sharp eyes swept over the black-robed man, and he also chased after him. The man in black stood still and looked at the distant star in the sky and sighed. Chapter 571. When Fang Yen punched Ho Zhendong into the sky, he felt that he had turned martial fanatic into Grey Wolf. Now Fang Yen ran as fast as he could, feeling like Happy Goat who was about to be eaten by Grey Wolf. No matter how smart Happy Goat was, he still fell into Grey Wolf's trap. This was an ambush. They had already planned for this moment to come. From the encounter with martial fanatic on the Pearl River, to the fairy offering flowers, to the demonstration of the cracking turtle technique in school, to the provocation and threats at noon, and the crazy battle on the one-sword peak just now. Otherwise, how would they know that he was going to compete with martial fanatic Ho Zhendong tonight? How could they just happen to hide on the way back after his great victory? There were not so many coincidences in this world, and all coincidences could be manipulated by a mastermind behind the scenes. Fang Yen could even guess who the mastermind was, but it was too late to say anything now. Without a doubt, martial fanatic was also one of them. martial fanatic was one of Hua Xia's 7 fanatics? How could he also be one of them? Fang Yan did not understand, he did not understand at all. How could martial fanatic be bribed? What else could he be bribed with? For someone who loved martial arts so much, what else could he be greedy for? And there was a more serious fact that Fang Yan did not dare to think about, because it was too hurtful and too cruel. Escape. Use all the strength in his body to escape. Why should he escape? Why not fight with them? Fang Yan was not an idiot. Knowing that the enemy was strong and he was weak, why would he take the initiative to run to his death? Our ancestors told us many years ago that the first rule of fighting is, fight if you can win, run if you can't. Fang Yan had just fought with martial fanatic, and he had used up too much of his strength and stamina. Now was his weakest time, but he did not know how many people the other side had. How many people had come? One jumped down from the big tree, another jumped up from the bushes, and another pretentious fellow stood on top of a big rock. What was this? Like a stray dog, in a sorry state. Fang Yan did not use the Fang family's plum blossom steps, nor did he use the old drunkard's drunken crane rides the wind. What he needed was to run in a straight line, from the top of the mountain to the bottom, dodging trees and jumping rocks. Fang Yan's body jumped up and down, moving up and down. His body was as agile as a monkey, and his movements were as nimble as a rabbit. He was the spirit of the forest, a flea in the darkness. Pa, kacha. The sound of stones being crushed and branches being broken could be heard incessantly, attracting the pursuit of the people behind them. Panicking without choosing a path, was Fang Yan's current state? There was a large rock in front of him. Fang Yan lightly tapped the tip of his foot and leaped high into the air. Swoosh! A streak of silver light flickered as it chopped towards Fang Yan's head in an incomparably biting cold manner. There was an ambush behind the rock, and it was an expert lying in ambush. He didn't show his head, and he didn't even see Fang Yan's body. Just from the way he leaped, he knew what he was going to do, a graceful slash, incomparably domineering. Fang Yan's body was still in midair, his body maintaining a diving posture. The sudden appearance of the slash had indeed caught people off guard. Fang Yan's body suddenly stopped in midair, as if he had suddenly lost gravity and Earth's gravitational pull. Yes, the current Fang Yan had indeed lost gravity and Earth's gravitational pull. He used the Tai Chi force to repel the air around him, putting himself in a state of vacuum. This way, he could instantly stop in midair, as if he had cast a body-freezing spell on himself. However, Fang Yan could only cast a body-freezing spell on himself, but he couldn't cast it on others. When his body froze in midair, the long saber still slashed towards his body as if it had eyes of its own. Horizontal slash. This kind of saber technique originated from the Japanese kendo, and every slash had only one variation. Horizontal slashes and vertical slashes all had the word one, so it was also called horizontal slash. It was also known as true energy slash. This was because every time the saber slashed out, before the saber could hurt anyone, the true energy carried by the long saber would already be able to hurt someone. Fang Yan felt the strong energy, which was like an invisible knife attacking him. It collided fiercely with the protective barrier formed by Fang Yan's Tai Chi force, producing a hissing sound. The true energy of the horizontal slash was ultimately unable to break through the barrier, so it could only roar outside the barrier to vent its grievance and unwillingness. At the same time, the long saber itself also slashed horizontally. Fang Yan wasn't confident that his protective barrier could block the long saber. After his body stopped, he immediately used the willow catkin follows the wind. When the saber slashed towards him, the saber's energy and killing intent actually blew him away. Because the released energy was too strong, a transparent ball appeared around his body. Under the protection of the round ball, his body flew backward. The saber missed, and a gray figure leaped from behind the rock into the air at lightning speed. Retracting the saber. Another slash. It was still the horizontal slash. The difference was that previously it was a horizontal slash, but this time it was a vertical slash. His body was also flying in the air as he chased after Fang Yan, who was flying backward. Fang Yan retreated very quickly. The black shadow chased even faster. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the process of chasing, the black figure consecutively slashed out 3 times, 1 horizontal slash, 1 vertical slash, and 1 demonic slash. The 3 slashes formed a rice shape, which happened to lock Fong Yan's body in the middle. Merciless rice slash. Pa! The energy barrier on Fong Yan's body shattered, and his body also fell backwards to the ground. Fong Yan's body landed on the ground, and the black figure's body also landed at the same time. From the time when Fong Yan encountered the rock to the sudden attack of the horizontal slash, it was only a blink of an eye. However, in such a short period of time, the black figure slashed out 5 times, and Fong Yan also dodged 5 times. The black figure held the long saber, and the tip of the long saber was pointed at the ground. The unfamiliar face was someone that Fong Yan had never seen before. But with the 5 slashes he had just made, he was certainly not an unknown person. Fong Yan smiled bitterly. His old friend was really willing to spend a lot of money this time. Couldn't wait any longer? Must he make me stay on this one-sword peak tonight? While Fong Yan and the mysterious sabersman were confronting each other, there was the sound of hurried footsteps coming from behind. Obviously, the ambushers had also caught up. Sneaky brat! The small-headed old man ran in front of Fong Yan and angrily stared at him and said, "You ran without saying a word. Brat, why don't you run? Continue running?" Fong Yan looked at him with a smile and said, "Who said I didn't say a word? I shouted at the time that if you didn't show up, I wouldn't accompany you. Who said I didn't show up? I'm standing in front of you, and I've talked to you, and you still dare to say I didn't show up?" Fong Yan smiled and said, "But I didn't see you. Maybe you're too short." "Bastard brat, who are you calling short? Say it clearly." The small-headed old man was irascible, and when he heard Fong Yan say he was short, he was full of dissatisfaction and wanted to argue with him. The big-headed old man frowned slightly and said, "Why are you talking to him? Let's fight quickly and waste time." They wanted to fight quickly, but Fong Yan didn't want to fight quickly at all, because if he fought quickly, he would soon be finished by these people. He had just fought with the martial addict, and he needed more time to rest. Every minute of rest would increase his chances of winning or escaping in the battle. But Fong Yan shouted, "I have no enmity with you. Why do you treat me like this?" The big-headed old man sneered and said, "This question is unnecessary. If someone wants you to die, you have to die." Aren't these words too overbearing? Fong Yan retorted bluntly. "If I tell you to eat sh*t, do you have to eat sh*t too? Presumptuous." The big-headed old man shouted angrily. "Brat, you're courting death. Don't blame me for being merciless." Kong. Fong Yan thought for a moment and said, "King of Hell holds Kongju?" Kongju was stunned and said coldly, "So what if you know Grandpa's name? Anyway, don't even think about leaving this sword peak today. You're Kongju." Fong Yan pointed to the grumpy small-headed old man and said, "You're Kongju's twin brother, Arhet Fist Xiaomu, right?" "That's me, Grandpa." Xiaomu nodded proudly. "Sure enough, rotten wood can't be carved." Fong Yan said with a smile, "Your brother has much more temperament than you, and he's also much better looking than you." Xiaomu flew into a rage, pointed at Kongju, and shouted, "Who said he has more temperament than me? Who said he's better looking than me? How can you tell? I'm obviously more handsome, okay? Everyone says I'm more handsome, you're lying through your teeth." "He's stalling for time," the nameless swordsman said. "Luo Jin, shut up. I want to make things clear with this bastard. What right does he have to say that Kongju is better looking than me? Kongju's head is so big, his body is so skinny, and he looks like a big-headed doll standing there. How can he have more temperament than me?" "Luo Jin?" Fong Yan looked at the swordsman, his eyes slightly trembling. "Blade Lord Luo Jin?" Blade Lord Luo Jin was a powerful figure who had been famous for decades, and was an expert of the same generation as old drunkard Mo Qingdi. Back then, these people were all powerful and invincible. They were all the brightest and most dazzling stars in the inner martial world. Old drunkard Mo Qingdi once said that Luo Jin dominated the world with one move. He only knew one move, and only knew one blade. His blade only had 3 transformations: horizontal slash, vertical slash, and evil slash. But it was only these 3 transformations that had cut down countless experts. Luo Jin did not answer Fang Yan's question, and only looked at him coldly, as if he was looking at a corpse. Luo Jin did not talk to dead people, because he felt that it was a very inauspicious thing to do. Fang Yan laughed and said, "What an honor, I didn't think that I would meet so many famous experts in one night. Snake Lord, where the hell did you go?" Chapter 572. The mountain breeze was blowing, and the night was dark. On a moonless night, the star in the distant sky was the only light overhead. The martial addict was still lying on the ground, with no intention of getting up. He felt very bored, and he was not interested in doing anything. He even felt that getting up was very boring. Where to go after getting up? To do what? Therefore, even though Fang Yan had left for a long time, he was still lying in the same place. There were no mosquito bites, and no venomous snake attacks. He had become one with the surrounding environment. He had become a stone or a tree. He had become a part of this world. The surrounding insects suddenly disappeared, and the grass that was blown by the breeze no longer swayed. Time stood still, and the whole world suddenly froze. It was a feeling that made one's whole body tense, as if the hair on one's body was even more ironed on one's skin. It was sticky and uncomfortable. The martial addict's eyes were slightly cold, but instantly became gentle again. He said, "Sit anywhere, I won't get up to entertain you." A man in a black robe stood on a large rock not far away. After hearing the martial addict's words, he moved to the place where the martial addict was lying and sat down cross-legged. He looked at the bored martial addict and asked in a low voice, "What? Do you want to cherish talent?" "I promised you, and I've done it," the martial addict said impatiently. He didn't like the feeling of being seen through, even though it was always easy for others to see through him. "You just did it," the man in the gray robe said. "I didn't do it. A young man who can solve my fairy's flower, a young man who can break my crack sword array, it would be a lie to say that he doesn't care. This is a good seedling." The martial addict sighed softly. "Why bother? I saw it all." The man in the gray robe said, "Otherwise, with your real strength, how could he escape so easily? You are a man who would not easily retreat even when facing Azure Dragon, and it is not easy for him to defeat you. How could he be beaten by this kid for a long time? Martial addict, you have no acting skills, you don't know how to act." "I have no acting skills, so I don't want to act," the martial addict said. "I told you, I won't kill him with my own hands. I'll just waste a portion of his strength. If you don't kill him, he will still die because of you. What difference does it make?" The gray-robed man said, "You know he won't be able to leave Solitary Sword Mountain tonight. We can't let him leave Solitary Sword Mountain either." "Not necessarily," the martial addict said. "Not necessarily?" The gray-robed man looked at the martial addict in surprise and said, "You have so much confidence in him? He's a different kind of person. He's also a person who can always bring people surprises. I know some physiognomy. He's not a short-lived person. Even if you didn't consume too much of his physical strength, do you know who he's going to face today?" "I don't know. Yama Palm Diabolo, Arhet Fist Withered Wood, those 2 lackeys with no integrity. We were born to be brothers." The gray-robed man was not angry and said with a smile, "There is also an old friend of yours, Saber Monarch Luo Jin." "Luo Jin?" The martial addict's expression froze. He smiled bitterly and said, "I didn't think you would even invite him. Luo Jin disappeared for 20 years, right?" "No, 24 years. Do you know where he went?" "I do." "Where did he go?" "Nameless Mountain." "Nameless Temple in Nameless Mountain?" "He's in Nameless Temple in Nameless Mountain." "Why is he there?" "Because he doesn't want to leave." The martial addict suddenly sat up straight and said, "You gave him the saber manual?" "I gave him the saber manual." "No wonder." The martial addict's eyes lit up and he said, "The saber manual of the Saber Kingly Big Mouth can indeed make someone stay in a place and conceal their identity for 24 years. It's definitely worth entrusting one's life to. Beauty is given to beauties, sword is given to heroes. The saber manual should have been given to Luo Jin. Only he has the right to take it." The gray-robed man said. "He's the best saber user in the inner Jianghu." The martial addict finally crawled up from the ground. He looked at the gray-robed man sitting cross-legged in front of him and said, "What do you want? Why did you gather so many experts to risk their lives for you?" "For a wish." "What wish?" "You'll know in the future." The gray-robed man said, 20 years ago, you lost to the Azure Dragon and fell into the martial barrier. You traveled hundreds of miles to Nameless Mountain and asked me to guide you. I taught you a move." "Yes." The martial addict nodded. "You taught me the fairy flower offering. From the fairy flower offering, I comprehended 3,200 variations of martial arts and successfully broke through the barrier. So you agreed to do 3 things for me. I've already done the first one for you today. There are 2 more." The gray-robed man said, "I don't want to be like this again. Continue to lie down." The gray-robed man said, "It's cool and refreshing here. I can enjoy the good times at the foot of the mountain. The show down there should be starting soon, right? Why didn't you do it yourself?" The martial addict suddenly asked. "Why didn't you kill him yourself?" "Because I promised someone to spare his life." "Then why did you ask someone else to kill him?" "I didn't promise to spare his life." The gray-robed man said something that was difficult to pronounce. The martial addict's IQ was low. It took him several times to understand the meaning of this sentence. After the gray-robed man finished speaking, he stretched out his body and disappeared. The show should be starting soon. The martial addict muttered to himself, "What a pity, don't underestimate your enemy." Fang Yen was very angry at the Snake Lord. As a snake slave whose snake eye was controlled, you had to protect your master at all times. If your master wasn't safe, you wouldn't be able to keep your little life either. Fang Yen originally thought that the Snake Lord was silently protecting him in a dark corner. Wasn't it the nature of a snake to take advantage of an unprepared person to bite him? But now he was facing the Yama Palm Diablo and the Arhat Fist Xiaomu, and there was also the Sword Lord Luo Jin who was waiting for him and could strike at any time. At this time, Fang Yen needed help. He needed someone who could fight side by side with him, someone who he could trust his back with. In front of Fang Yen stood the Sword Lord Luo Jin and the Arhat Fist Xiaomu, and behind him stood the Yama Palm Diablo and the masked man in black. If the Snake Lord didn't appear, Fang Yen would be in a miserable situation of being attacked from both the front and the back. If Fang Yen was killed, no matter how powerful the Snake Lord's venomous snake was, what would be the point? Of course, Fang Yen had his own guesses. Could it be that the Snake Lord had already betrayed them and came to deal with him, waiting for his death to take back his snake eye? Fang Yen sneered in his heart. "You want to take back what you gave away? I'll eat it in one bite and not give it back to you." It was just that it was a little disgusting to eat it, but he was going to die anyway, so he couldn't be too particular about it. Wouldn't it take too much time to let someone wash it and cook it before eating it? No one answered. The Snake Lord seemed to be dead. Fang Yen was shocked. This possibility did exist. It wasn't impossible for the ambushers to quietly kill the Snake Lord while he was fighting with the martial arts fanatic. However, the Snake Lord wasn't weak, and he was in the forest. Every insect and beast here could be his subordinates. If they wanted to kill the Snake Lord, they would need to expend a lot of effort, right? And in the process, the Snake Lord couldn't even send a message? What happened in the middle that he didn't know? The Snake Lord. Fang Yen shouted again. "Your sister is out." Fang Yen felt that it was better to lie to him. Maybe he wouldn't be able to hide anymore once he heard that his sister was out. "No need to shout." Xiao Mu sneered. "He's already dead." Dead? Fang Yan's guess was confirmed, but he still felt a little uncomfortable. "You said too much." Diablo was very dissatisfied with his idiot brother. After scolding his brother, he looked at the Sword Lord and said, "Are you going to attack first, or should we?" I just attacked 5 times, Sword Lord Luo Jin said. I'll attack 5 more times. If I can't kill him in 5 times, then it's your turn. Okay, Diablo said. Why should he go first? Xiao Mu said unhappily. I also want to kill this kid. He said I'm not as good-looking as you. You really aren't as good-looking as your brother, Fang Yan said. He wanted to stall for a while longer. You bastard, shut up, Diablo shouted. If it weren't for the fact that this guy was his brother, he would have killed him. Diablo and Xiao Mu retreated, leaving the wide battlefield to Fang Yan and Luo Jin. They guarded the 2 sides, one on the left and one on the right, in case Fang Yan suddenly ran away while he was fighting. Fang Yan knew why they were doing this. He wanted to angrily ask them one question. Where is the most basic trust between people? Sword Lord Luo Jin held his long blade, his dead fish eyes staring unblinkingly at Fang Yan. Fang Yan was also looking at Luo Jin, looking at Luo Jin's eyes. It was very strange, his eyes were very cold, but there was no killing intent in them. Could it be that he didn't want to kill him? Fang Yan knew that the possibility of this was very low. It wasn't that he didn't want to kill him, he just treated him like a pig or a chicken. Which butcher would have killing intent in their eyes when they were killing a pig or a chicken? They only treated it as a kind of profession, a habit, a way to make a living. To them, stabbing a knife into the neck of a pig or cutting off the neck of a chicken was a very insignificant matter. Why would they need killing intent, killing intent, killing intent? Fang Yan felt threatened. He felt the huge deterrence brought about by the saber in the man's hand. Luo Jin held his long blade, walking step by step towards Fang Yan. That's right, he was walking. He did not run, nor did he bend over to dive. He was like an idiot, walking step by step towards Fang Yan. He stopped in front of Fang Yan, then slashed his blade towards Fang Yan's head. Chapter 573. It was just a normal slash. There was no lightning, no howling wind, no tearing of space, no burning of the air. There wasn't even any chi. The Blade Monarch's slash had no chi flow. Wasn't this the biggest joke in the world? How could one injure someone without chi flow? How could one defeat the enemy without chi flow? It was like a woodcutter chopping firewood or a boorish man hoeing the ground. Their object was to cut the log in two, and to soften the hard ground. That was all. Therefore, there was no need for strength. A simple slash, straight slash, no fancy movements, no complicated foreshadowing. If I want to slash you, I'll slash you. It was that direct, that willful. This slash is called chopping firewood, the Blade Monarch said in a low voice. His voice was as slow and deep as the speed at which he swung his saber. It was as heavy as a 1,000-pound boulder pressing on one's chest, making it difficult to breathe. He took a step forward and slashed. This was the Blade Monarch's entire attack method. Even the name of his slash technique was simple and ordinary. It wasn't as impressive as the 18 dragons subduing palms or the 9 Manual's Heaven and Earth Great Shift, which sounded like an awesome move. Just say the name and all the bandits, bullies and thieves within a 10-mile radius would immediately leave without a trace. It wasn't as elegant as the melancholic sorrow palm or the lover's will sword, which made one's imagination run wild. Chopping firewood? Who came up with this name? If you're so perfunctory, I promise I won't beat you to death. Fang Yan didn't know the origin of the blade manual, so he didn't know why the name, chopping firewood, was used to name a slash technique. He just felt that the person who came up with this name was uncultured. Fang Yan's guess was right. The person who created this slash technique and named it was uncultured. Chopping firewood, Xiao Mu laughed and said, "Fortunately, my Arhat fist is related to Arhat, so it sounds domineering and unconventional. Why isn't it called chopping vegetables?" "There is indeed a chopping vegetable technique," Kongzhu said in a low voice. "Really?" Xiao Mu was shocked. What kind of martial arts did this saber monarch learn? I heard that he used the Luo family's falling rain knife, which was passed down in his family. When he waved the knife, it was like falling rain splashing, airtight. How did he become a chef now? Saber Monarch hasn't appeared for more than 20 years. Where do you think he went? Where did he go? He obtained the saber manual of the Saber King, Li Big Mouth. For the past 20 years, he has been practicing the saber in seclusion. Saber King Li Big Mouth? Xiaomu was shocked. The chef from prison? Yes, it's exactly the Knife King Li Big Mouth who came out of prison. Kongzhu nodded his head with a dignified expression. Li Big Mouth is a chef in the Hate Mountain prison. He has been cooking for the prisoners in the prison all his life. But because his father was a secular disciple of Shaolin Temple, he established the foundation of Shaolin Temple's hard martial arts since he was young, and he also came into contact with some strange masters and bandits. He chopped firewood and chopped vegetables every day for decades, and he actually created an invincible saber technique. After a pause, Kongzhu said with a serious expression, "Do you still remember the best archery in the world? Archer god Tang Lai? Not bad. It was archer god Tang Lai. At that time, everyone thought that archer god Tang Lai was the #1 expert in the Hate Mountain. They didn't even know who Li Big Mouth was. Once, archer god went to the kitchen to inspect the work and saw Li Big Mouth's saber technique when he chopped vegetables. He was immediately deeply shocked. And then? The man in black behind him asked. The noise of the big saber is like a torrential downpour. The cutting of the small saber is like a whisper. The noise of the cutting is like a mess of bullets. The big and small pearls fall on a jade plate. The silver bottle is broken, the liquid is splashed, the iron horse is galloping, the saber and spear are howling. When the song ends, the sound of the saber is like silk being torn apart. This was archer god Tang Lai's evaluation of Li Big Mouth's saber technique. Tang Lai was delighted and asked Li Big Mouth to have a match with him. Did Li Big Mouth win? Li Big Mouth didn't win, Kongzhu said. He still lost? Archer god is archer god, Xiaomu said with a sigh. It's a pity that I didn't have the chance to meet archer god. Otherwise, I would definitely have a taste of his magical archery. Li Big Mouth didn't lose either, Kongzhu said. Xiaomu's bad temper flared up again as he grumbled. One moment you say Li Big Mouth didn't win, the next moment you say Li Big Mouth didn't lose. Did he win or lose? He didn't win or lose, Kongzhu said. Li Big Mouth knew archer god Tang Lai's strength, so how would he dare to fight with him? So Tang Lai said to Li Big Mouth that they were just casually sparring and didn't know how to use arrows. In the end, archer god used arrows? The man in black asked. Yes, Li Big Mouth's saber technique forced archer god Tang Lai to use arrows. Kongzhu nodded. Tang Lai used arrows to subdue Li Big Mouth. He forced him to retreat. How do you know these things? Xiaomu asked. Why don't I know? Because someone saw Tang Lai, and Tang Lai said it himself, Kongzhu said. Archer god Tang Lai knew of Li Big Mouth's strength, so he began to guide him to develop his saber technique, and made him organize his saber technique and name it. Li Big Mouth didn't study much, so how could he do such a thing? After spending a few months, he finally thought of a way. What way? His saber technique only had 3 moves. One was a straight chop, named chopping firewood. This move was comprehended from his many years of chopping firewood. The second move was a horizontal chop, named chopping vegetables. This move was comprehended from chopping cabbages for more than 30 years. The last move was an upward or downward slash, and he named it eviscerate. It was trained from his daily practice of removing the bones of animals or the meat in the cracks of bones. He only had these 3 moves, but he was invincible with these 3 moves, and became the Saber King of his generation. Xiaomu pointed at the Lord of Saber Luojin and asked, Then why did he slash out 5 times just now? Why could he slash out another 5 times? For the previous 5 slashes, he used his family's falling rain saber technique, or rather, the falling rain saber technique that was integrated with the unique technique of the saber manual. Obviously, those 5 slashes didn't cut this kid into 2. What he used now was the true unique technique of the saber manual. Even so, the black-clothed man behind him said, there are only 3 moves in the saber manual. How could he slash out 5 times? That is unknown. Kongzhu was a little annoyed by these 2 people's questions and said, it is possible that Li Big Mouth had other moves that were not recorded in the saber manual. Or it could be a saber technique that the Lord of Saber Luo Jin created after living in seclusion for more than 20 years. Who would know such a secret? Xiao Mu laughed coldly and said, I hope Luo Jin's saber isn't too sharp. If he cleanly chopped Fang Yan into pieces, I wouldn't have the chance to make a move. Kong Zhu coldly glanced at his little brother and said, watch the battle carefully. From their point of view, this time, Fang Yan would die without a doubt. It was also because of this reason that they could still chat and talk about the secrets of the Jianghu in this kind of life and death battlefield. If it was anyone else who dared to so casually raise a long black saber and slash at him, Fang Yan would have already rushed forward and slapped that person in the face and cursed, are you sick? If you're sick, go back and get treated. But this person was the Lord of Sabers. Although his saber was not beautiful, and the name of his saber technique was not flashy, this person was the Lord of Sabers. He was a saber expert who had been famous for decades. Fang Yan had no choice but to be careful. When he walked towards him, Fang Yan was already on guard. His legs spread apart, his body slightly bowed, and his body swayed left and right, making a roly-poly toy posture. When the Lord of Sabers slashed out with his saber, Fang Yan felt that this saber technique was even more strange. It was too strange. Even the most useless member of the Fang family, Fang Yingxiong, could easily subdue it with brute force or skillful attacks without the use of qi. Perhaps even the most useless member of the Fang family, Fang Yingxiong, could easily defeat it. Fang Yan could completely avoid this saber, and he could use Drunken Crane riding the wind to deal with it, making it impossible for the Lord to find his real body. But Fang Yan didn't do this. The Taiji heart made his 5 senses extremely sharp, and there was a voice in his heart telling him not to do such a thing. Fang Yan didn't dodge, his body moved, and he faced the Lord of Sabers head-on. Facing the saber with both hands, it looked extremely stupid. The Lord of Sabers' eyes slightly trembled, and a trace of doubt flashed on his face. Then, his expression became even colder, and the strength of his saber became even fiercer. The long saber arrived in an instant. Apart from the blunt wind brought by the heavy blade, there was still no abnormality. He still couldn't feel a trace of energy. Not even a trace of killing intent. Fang Yan's body entered the range of the long saber. He wanted to use his speed advantage to enter the blind spot of the Lord of Sabers. The human body's organs were fixed, and the range of movement was also limited. Therefore, everyone's body had some blind spots that were hard to reach. For example, your back, your ribs, or any other place. When the Lord of Sabers fiercely slashed, his chest was the blind spot. Because if he stretched out his arm and raised the long saber, he wouldn't be able to use his arm and the long saber to protect his chest. Therefore, Fang Yan wanted to give him a fatal blow there. This was the attack route that he had already calculated. Everything went as he expected. No, it was even smoother than he had imagined. He easily entered the blind spot, and his fist was already aimed at the Lord of Sabers' heart. As long as his fist hit the Lord of Sabers' heart, the Lord of Sabers' heart might be blasted out of his body. Whoosh! Fang Yan suddenly sensed danger. He felt a piercingly cold killing intent coming at him. All the pores on his body stood up, and he could feel his heart beating violently. A majestic killing intent came at him. It locked onto him from all directions. Fang Yan was like a puppet whose acupoints had been sealed, or a magician had cast a spell on him. He couldn't move his body at all. Fang Yan finally understood that this was a scam. This was the biggest scam. Chapter 574. What kind of kung fu was the best in the world? Everyone had a different answer in their heart. Countless people would have countless answers. But there was a fact that everyone recognized. Those who were good at qi were countless times stronger than those who practiced strength. Like a threshold, you knew how to use the qi in your body, you discovered more secrets of your body. Congratulations, you have the right to enter the Neijiang Lake. That's your ticket. If you practiced strength all your life, even if you had infinite strength, you would lose miserably when you met a qi master. No matter how good a person's mental calculation ability was, what chance did they have against a computer? And a computer could calculate endlessly without eating or drinking. As long as it had enough energy. Strong body and strong bones, this was the level that 99% of martial artists could achieve. 1 against 10, 1 against 100, this was already a master chosen from 10,000. Understanding the world, searching for the mysteries of the human body. Discovering air currents, guiding air currents, using air currents, smashing rocks and breaking wood, beating cows across mountains, cutting off rivers and rivers, destroying heaven and earth, falling stars. This was the power of God. Yes, from ancient times to the present, through the dynasties, countless people had searched for or wanted to borrow the power of God. Qin Shi Huang sent out countless virgin boys and girls to the celestial mountain to seek the immortality of the elders, didn't it also because he believed in the existence of God? Those people in the Nejiang Lake, they were climbing on the God's path. Going through hardships, spending time in life, just to one day be able to stand on the throne of God, to hold the sun and moon in their hands, to punch through the stars. Of course, that path was extremely painful and infinitely far. Lonely and desolate, forgetting for a lifetime. But there was still a group of people who clenched their teeth and refused to give up. Luo Jin belonged to this group of people. He was one of the countless people who sought the Tao. The Blade King Li Dezue didn't practice using qi, but self-taught and comprehended a supreme blade technique. His blade technique could force the god of archery Tang Lai, who had qi, to retreat step by step, and in the end, he had no choice but to use a divine arrow to defend himself. In other words, Li Dezue subverted people's understanding. Not only qi could enter the Nejiang Lake. Li Big Mouth did not have any strength, so with the strength he displayed, could it be that he could not enter the inner river lake? Most importantly, through the research of Tang Lai and the others, when Li Big Mouth wielded his sword, he could use the most primitive qi of heaven and earth that had not been refined or guided by his body, which was the brute force that the people of Jianghu despised. There was another classic example in history. Li Yuan's fourth son, Li Xuanba, wielded 2 sledgehammers and dominated the world. He was known as the first hero of the Sui and Tang dynasties. However, due to his murderous intent, he went against his teacher's teachings and killed Yuan Qing, who had 3 years of dragon life. The 9 heavens responding thunder heavenly Lord Puhua took revenge and died under the wrath of the heavens. Li Xianba was the kind of hero who relied on brute force to conquer the world. Although he suffered the wrath of the heavens, he opened another path for future generations to practice martial arts and seek the Tao, the strength of the body itself. The Saber King Li Big Mouth belonged to this type of person, and so did the Saber Monarch Luo Jin. After Luo Jin received the Saber Manual, he cried bitterly. It was not a pleasant surprise, but a choice. Because he was very clear that if he wanted to learn the peerless saber technique of the Saber Manual, the first thing he had to do was to release all of his inner qi from his sea of qi, turning himself into a normal person with only strength. Just like Lin Pingji, the first thing he had to do after receiving the Bixia swordplay was to castrate himself in order to learn this technique. Of course, Lin Pingji, Yu Buchuan, and the others had complicated feelings at the time. In the end, Luo Jin made a choice. He pierced through his sea of qi, turning himself into a useless cripple. For a long period of time, Luo Jin could not even lift his chopping knife. He had used more than 20 years to establish his name as the Saber Monarch, but it was destroyed in one night. Then he used another 20 years to slowly regain what he had lost. Every successful person was worthy of respect, and the Saber Monarch was a role model. Therefore he slashed with his saber. He chopped out Li Big Mouth's chopping knife. Li Big Mouth had no killing intent, and neither did Luo Jin. Li Big Mouth had no inner qi, and Luo Jin had no inner qi from his sea of qi. Li Big Mouth's knife used the power of his body to attract the power of nature, and the power of nature was Li Big Mouth's inner qi. Luo Jin's knife was the same. People fighting with each other, there was endless joy. People fighting with nature, they were looking for trouble. Fang Yan was feeling unspeakably bitter. It was only now that he deeply felt the profoundness and power of the chopping knife. It was only now that he understood the theory behind the chopping knife. What was the most brilliant scam? It was the unpredictability of the world. Because tomorrow had not arrived, no one knew what would happen next. Chopping wood was Fang Yan's the unpredictability of the world. It hid its killing intent, and it also hid its power of nature. It took advantage of the situation and borrowed the force of nature to attack. The worst thing was, even Luo Jin himself did not know the changes of his knife. The changes of the knife completely depended on the changes of the opponent. Luo Jin was the knife, and the knife was the wielder. This was Li Big Mouth's knife manual, the ultimate skill of the Knife King. Fang Yan became a puppet that could not speak or move. Apart from thinking, he could not do anything else. It was like a blooming epiphyllum, like Cinderella wearing crystal shoes, or like a huge black curtain with a meteor shower. That ordinary saber strike, that simple saber strike, suddenly became so dazzling that it was hard for people to look at it directly. Xiao. The long knife cut through heaven and earth, cut through the night sky. It flashed with a silver light, heading straight for Fang Yan's head. The current Fang Yan could only be trampled on. Don't! The masked man in black stared with her eyes wide open, screaming. No one would have thought that the Knife King would be so powerful. Just as she was about to pounce on Fang Yan, who was in the middle of the battle, Kongzhu suddenly made his move. With a stretch of his wrist, countless palm shadows overlapped, and the unprepared man in black was sent flying by his palm. Pa! The masked man's body landed heavily on the ground. Too powerful, Xiao Mu's eyes glowed, staring unblinkingly at the knife in the Knife King's hand. What a simple knife! The gray-robed old man on top of the mountain softly praised. What a dazzling knife! After the Knife King, another Knife King, this is a good sign. Don't! Fang Yan also roared in his mind. How could he die? He still had a lot of money to spend, a lot of things to do, a lot of women, without saying goodbye. He still had a lot of favors to repay, a lot of hatred to vent. How could he die? Even if he died, he could not be killed by a knife. That way of dying would be too miserable and unsightly. If Fang Yingying saw his body that was cut in half, he would mutter next to the coffin, "How could I be cut in half? It doesn't fit the aesthetics of our appearance association." At that time, wouldn't Fang Yan jump out of his coffin and strangle him to death? The knife's edge was sharp, and the knife's intent was overwhelming. Fang Yan could only see one knife, but he could feel countless knives attacking him from all directions. The most unbearable torture was a mountain of knives or a sea of fire. To Fang Yan, he was currently drowning in a sea of knives. Ears were useless, so Fang Yan covered his ears. Eyes were useless, so Fang Yan closed his eyes. Even his limbs were useless, so Fang Yan allowed them to lock him up. Fang Yan's Taiji heart spun crazily. This time, it was spinning faster and fiercer than ever before. Huff, huff. His danton was a fiery red, as if it was on fire. His sea of qi had turned into a wheel of fire that was hard to see with the naked eye, like a black hole in space that was constantly devouring everything around it. Fang Yan felt thirsty, as if his body was about to be cooked by the Taiji heart. So the Taiji heart can be used as a grill, Fang Yan thought. Strange, at such a dangerous moment, how could he have such a thought? Fang Yan really wanted to slap himself. And that was exactly what he did. Pa! His face burned with pain. But what made him surprised was that his hands and feet were still trapped by the knife intent that the Blade Lord Luo Jin had released, and he could not move at all. If that was the case, then who was it that slapped his face? Ghost slapping his face? It was said that when a person's martial arts reached a profound level, they could use a power that was not controlled by this world and was unknown to others. The people of Neijiang called this the ghost slapping face. The knife came closer and closer, already reaching the top of Fang Yan's head. Kacha, kacha. Thanks to the Taiji heart, Fang Yan could clearly feel the hair on his head being cut off by the knife's energy. 1 hair, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fang Yan was very worried that after this fight, he would become baldy. Yi Ro, Fang Yan yelled loudly. He did not know why he would yell out Yi Ro's name at such a moment of life and death, but at this moment, Fang Yan really missed Yi Ro. Let it be a farewell. As he yelled, he stretched out his hands to receive Luo Jin's knife. Yes, although his hands were trapped by the knife intent and the power of nature, but he still stretched out his hands. It was as if he wanted to slap himself in the face, and his face was burning with pain. Shua! A blazing sun soared into the sky, like a pillar of light shooting up to the sky. This silvery white light illuminated the one-sword peak, and then illuminated all things in the world. His appearance was too sudden, his light was too dazzling. It was a divine light, and it was also a holy light. In this pitch-black world, in this one-sword peak where there was no light, it was the only star. Therefore, the surrounding people found it hard to open their eyes. When everyone had adapted to his appearance, when everyone was able to open their eyes, they had all gotten used to him. They saw a miraculous scene. Chapter 575. The human body is a treasure trove. You will never know how rich you are. Scientists have discovered that a normal person has about 14 to 15 billion brain cells, but less than 10% of them are developed and used. Most of them are in a dormant state. According to statistics, 98.5% of the brain cells are dormant, and some experts believe that only 1% of the brain functions. After the age of 30, a person's brain cells were dying at a rate of 100,000 per day. Although this was insignificant compared to the 15 billion brain cells in the human brain, if the ones dying were developed and functional brain cells, it would inevitably affect the brain's performance and cause the brain to become sluggish. About 95% of our brain's potential has yet to be developed and used. Even scientific elites like Einstein only developed about 13% of their brain's potential. 13% may seem like a very insignificant number, but it is considered one of the smartest people in the world. According to the statistics of scientists, developing the brain's potential and making oneself smarter is not a fantasy. Have you seen Luc Besson's Naked Body? No. Have you seen Luc Besson's Superman? This movie has a vivid description of the development of the human body's potential. When the human body is stimulated by poison, it begins to stimulate the brain to develop itself. The female protagonist turned from a young girl who had no strong points other than her pretty face and big breasts into a superwoman who could turn freely in midair and fight drug dealers with her bare hands. She had telepathy, could instantly absorb knowledge, and could even move through space. She was a superwoman who had experienced the past and present lives. Finally, when the female protagonist's brain is 100% developed, she becomes an omnipotent and omnipresent god. This is a science fiction movie, but it is also the right direction for human development. In the era of Qin Shi Huang, a phone call can be transmitted to a foreign country thousands of miles away, and in a few hours by plane, you can see the vast territory of your empire. For the people of that era, this is a miracle. For modern people, the ability that Fang Yan is showing now is also a miracle. The Saber King slashes. It is the Saber King Li Big Mouth's chopping knife. Just the wind of the knife can cut hair and make people's scalp burn. If the knife hits the head, it will be like chopping firewood, it will split the person in half. The Saber King is indeed going to do this. This was his mission, his goal. He owed that man a great debt of gratitude. That man was his second parent. No, not even his parents could give him what he had now. For a man who had spent his entire life pursuing martial arts, there was nothing more important than a martial arts manual. Moreover, he had obtained the saber manual of the generation's Saber King, Li Big Mouth. That was the saber technique that the King of Fire, Tang Zhong, had tried to cultivate but failed. How could he not treasure it? How could he not serve the person who gave him the saber manual? If he wanted Fang Yan dead, he would hack Fang Yan to death. This was the only thing he wanted to do on this trip. However, what was going on in front of him? Was he seeing a ghost or a god? The saber monarch's eyes widened in disbelief. He didn't know how to explain what was happening in front of him. What was happening? Why is this happening? Dao Jun muttered to himself. It shouldn't be like this. This was completely different from what he had imagined. Although there was only one blade, it had countless variations. Before he made this strike, he had already thought about Fang Yan's reaction. Escape and retreat. If he did that, His second strike, the chopping knife, would follow. After the heavy strike, it changed into a horizontal slash, cutting his retreating body into two. Of course, in the process of changing the move, there was a sudden acceleration. And Fang Yan's body was locked by the sneak attack of the saber intent and the force of nature. His hands and feet couldn't move to fight back, and he could only end up with his head separated from his body, if he retreated. It was a condensed beam of light, like a silver-white transparent crystal, that sprang out from his body and reached hundreds of meters high in the sky. Fang Yan's ears didn't hear, and his eyes didn't see. His limbs were still bound by the saber intent and the force of nature that the saber monarch released. It was possible that he had already broken free. However, at this time, Fang Yan had forgotten to move his limbs. Fang Yan's limbs didn't move, but he subconsciously used his hands to block the saber monarch's chopping knife. Thus, the silver-white beam of light split into two, or rather, two arms of the beam of light. One on the left and the other on the right. They gathered in the middle, tightly holding the saber monarch's chopping knife. Fang Yan had actually grabbed the chopping knife. Ignoring its sharp edge that could cut through iron like mud, ignoring its cold and domineering saber chi, ignoring the saber intent and the irresistible force of nature, it had easily blocked the saber monarch's chopping knife. What's going on? Xiaomu finally recovered from this incredible scene. Staring at the beam of light that had suddenly appeared, he flew into a rage and shouted, "What the hell is going on? Is this kid a monster?" "He must be a monster." Kongzhu stared at the beam of light in the sky without blinking. His mouth was slightly open, but he couldn't say anything. He had witnessed a miracle with his own eyes. This feeling, why did it make him feel so unhappy? The black-clothed man who had been sent flying by Kongzhu's Yama palm lay on the ground. Looking at Fang Yan, who was currently enveloped by the light, his eyes were filled with surprise and disappointment. This man, he always brought people surprises. He had never let anyone down. Many people said that Bai Xiu was the true hero of Swallow Dock, the most orthodox hero. No, it wasn't like that. Fang Yan was the true hero of Swallow Dock, and he would become a legend of Swallow Dock. His name would be engraved on the old monolith at the entrance of Swallow Dock. How many years had it been since a new name was added to that monolith? Light of Taiji, the gray-clothed man on the mountain peak screamed. He was standing on a steep boulder, very far from where Fang Yan and the saber monarch were fighting. However, in his eyes, this kind of distance wasn't something worth worrying about or overcoming. He saw everything that was happening in the distance clearly in his eyes and heart. He could even see it more clearly than the people watching from the sidelines. Light of Taiji, this kid actually comprehended the light of Taiji. Only with benevolence and compassion can one have the heart of Taiji. Only with righteousness and selflessness can one have the state of Taiji. Only with righteousness for the country and the people can one have the light of Taiji. The martial fanatic had long been attracted by the battle between Fang Yan and the saber monarch. He stood behind the gray-clothed man and spoke with a clear voice. This kid is benevolent, righteous, and righteous. He can be said to be the most outstanding genius in the last several hundred years. He is not inferior to the one from the Qin clan several hundred years ago. This is the fortune of our generation, the fortune of the Jianghu, and the fortune of our nation. Do you really have the heart to kill such a young man? The gray-clothed man's eyes were deep, and he didn't speak for a long time. Killing a miracle and destroying a legend, how wasteful is that? To be able to live in the same era as a young man like him, isn't that a fortunate thing? Just like how we have sighed countless times, why didn't we live in the same era as Qin Zongma hundreds of years ago? This is the regret in the hearts of all the martial artists. Let him go, let us be the bystanders of history, let us be the witnesses of miracles. Let us see what he can do, let us see what kind of brilliance he can emit in this era. Let him go? The gray-clothed man pondered for a long time, then spoke with a hoarse voice. To be honest, the moment I saw the light of Taiji, I really wanted to kill him myself. To kill a miracle, I am a miracle. To destroy a legend, I will create a new one. Why must it be him? But it's hard to go against the will of the heavens. Even the heavens are helping him. How can I go against the will of the heavens? This will be the punishment of the heavens. You mean, I won't do anything tonight? The gray-clothed man said. Whether he lives or dies, leave it to the will of the heavens. The martial addict bowed deeply to the gray-clothed man and said, Thank you. The gray-clothed man's eyes turned cold and said, What? Do you cherish talent to such an extent? You, the martial addict, are also a prideful person, and yet you are willing to bow to me in his place? When I gave you the fairy flower offering, did you say the word, thank, to me? For the sake of that irrelevant brat, you said the word, thank, twice. I'm not saying thank you in his place, the martial addict said, I'm saying thank you in my place. I can't become a miracle, but I can witness the rise of a miracle. Isn't this a kind of fortune? I'm not talented enough to walk a new path, but I can follow the path that others have already walked. This is also something that is infinitely beneficial to me. Saying, thank you, is a matter of course. The gray-clothed man sneered and said, Aren't you celebrating too early? I only said that I won't do anything. I didn't say that others won't do anything. I have a tolerant heart. I can give him one more chance. Others might not be willing to watch him rise so quickly. If someone else tries to kill him, he might not be able to escape from this mountain. If the Blade Monarch's saber can't stop him, who else can? The martial addict was shocked and asked. Let's just watch. The gray-clothed man's mouth curled into a strange smile. The show has only just begun. Chapter 576. Martial fanatic Ho Jindong had a very reasonable saying. I can't be a pioneer, but I'm honored to be a pioneer. He couldn't establish his own sect and become a legend. However, being able to be in the same generation as a legend was also a fortunate thing. Many years later, if someone wrote a history book, the battle between him and Fang Yen would be written down. Fang Yen turned into Ultraman, and the others became little monsters that surrounded and attacked Ultraman. The Blade Monarch felt it the most. According to the Blade Monarch's plan, once the momentum of the chopping blade was used up, he would immediately change it into a horizontal slash and use the second move, the kitchen knife. If the kitchen knife still couldn't hurt the enemy, then he would use the third move, the boning knife. Chopping firewood, chopping vegetables, and boning. The three moves were independent, but sometimes they could be combined into a single move. This was also the most powerful move in the saber manual. Unfortunately, the Blade Monarch couldn't use these three moves in one go. His rhythm and pace of attack were already disrupted by the Tai Chi light that Fang Yen suddenly comprehended. The Blade Monarch gathered his chi in his dantian and wanted to chop the chopping blade in his hand. However, no matter how much strength he used, the chopping blade remained motionless in the middle of the two silvery white lights. It was as if it was embedded inside, fusing with the two crystal arms. Since he couldn't chop down and couldn't chop Fang Yen in half, he wanted to pull out the chopping blade in his hand. After pulling it out, he would chop again. The chopping blade was still motionless. All his strength had already sunk into the sea. Fang Yen sensed the Blade Monarch's strange movement and knew what he was thinking. What is this? Fang Yen had been asking himself this question. Ever since that pillar of light appeared, ever since that seemingly solid pillar of light had been used by him to hold back the chopper that could have taken his life, he had been thinking about this question. Was there someone helping him? That old monk or that old Taoist? If they could use the spring of withered wood, they could naturally use other more brilliant moves. For example, releasing the chi in their bodies and then condensing it into a substance to save themselves. Since they said that he was the guardian of the Taiji diagram, wasn't it natural for him to put in some effort? Or did the heart of Taiji mutate again? Last time, the image only turned into lines. Why was the mutation this time so strange and scary? Of course, it still looked quite cool. In the future, he could use this beam of light to fight with others, block people's kitchen knives, and touch little girls' buttocks. No one would know it was him who did it. Is it my turn now? Fang Yen looked at Dao Jun and asked with a smile. The Saber Monarch's pupils shrank as he asked in a cold voice, "What is this?" Everyone had the desire to win, and everyone also had curiosity. Saber Monarch knew that he was going to win, but he really wanted to know how he had lost. What the hell was that beam of light? Is it really a good idea to hide a flashlight on your head? This is the light of justice, Fang Yen said. A just cause enjoys abundant support, while an unjust one finds little support. You set up a trap to kill me, even the heavens can't bear to watch. As he spoke, Fang Yen suddenly stretched out his palm. It was a light palm strike. Light clouds, light wind, like spring flowers and autumn fruits, like a drizzle of snow, like the chirping of insects and birds, like an earthworm loosening the soil. However, when the palm landed on Dao Jun's chest, Dao Jun's clothes were immediately torn to shreds by a majestic and overbearing force. Then the shreds flew in all directions. Not a single piece of cloth fell to the ground, as it was already burnt to ashes in the air. Bang! Saber Monarch's abdomen caved in, then popped up again. At the same time, Saber Monarch's body was sent flying. Before he landed, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Snowflakes splashed in the air as if it was raining blood. When Fang Yen struck out with his palm, the beam of light above his head disappeared. It came so suddenly, and left so mysteriously. It was as if it had never appeared in the first place. Pow! Kongzhu kicked the ground with the tip of his foot and flew into the air. He grabbed Saber Monarch, who was still in midair, and leaped toward his brother, Xiaomu. After they landed, Xiaomu and the man in black were already standing in front of them, one on the left and one on the right, to prevent Fang Yen from chasing after them. They were originally spread out, each guarding a corner. However, after Fang Yen displayed extraordinary martial arts skills that shocked them, they had no choice but to change their attacking stance. In other words, they had now gathered into a defensive formation. In the arena, strength was everything, and whoever was stronger would be more arrogant. After Saber Monarch was defeated, Fang Yen took control of the situation. Ugh! After Saber Monarch landed, his internal organs were almost displaced, and his blood was still boiling. He tried his best to stand up, but he still vomited large mouthfuls of blood. The power of Fang Yan's palm strike was enough for him to recuperate for 3 to 5 years. Kongzhu channeled his energy into Saber Monarch's body to help him suppress the boiling blood. He waited until Saber Monarch's emotions calmed down, and the purplish-red color on his face gradually disappeared before he withdrew his hand. He walked in front of Fang Yen and looked at him with a sharp gaze. The heart of Taiji has mutated again? This is the light of justice, Fang Yen said shamelessly. The light of justice would naturally only descend on righteous people. People like them who wanted to ambush and kill righteous people were naturally not good people. This was teacher Fang Yan's principle. If I can't beat you, I'll scold you. If I can't scold you, I'll beat you to death. If I can't beat you or scold you, I'll draw circles to curse you. Kongzhu knew that this was not the light of justice. How could there be such a thing in this world? He was clear about Saber Monarch's strength, but Saber Monarch couldn't even slash at him. This filled his heart with uncertainty. In a fight on the battlefield, it was either life or death. He couldn't afford to be careless. Kongzhu stared at Fang Yen with a sharp gaze and said, "This guy is troublesome, let's attack together." "That's not a good idea, is it?" Xiaomu said. "What's the point of us old people ganging up on a young one? How about I go up and test his strength?" "I don't believe that." "Shut up!" Kongzhu angrily shouted. He knew that his little brother liked to do things that would attract the attention of others. If it was before, he would let him do as he pleased. A leopard can't change its spots. He knew that his little brother was like this, and he didn't want to force him to do something he didn't want to do. But this time was different. He sensed danger from Fang Yan's body. He had a smile on his face as if nothing had happened. But from the palm he used to attack Saber Monarch earlier, he knew that this brat wanted to kill him. He hated them so much that he wanted to take Saber Monarch's life with that palm. If it were not for the fact that Saber Lord was very powerful and had been accumulating power before Fang Yen struck, Fang Yan's palm strike would have ended his life. "Let's attack together," Kongzhu said resolutely, his tone unquestionable. "Also, little girl, if you don't want to die, you'd better use all of your strength. You should know what your choice represents. You don't have a position, but your family does." "I understand." the black-clothed man said in a low voice. Attack! Kongzhu shouted. As he shouted, his body was already dashing towards Fang Yen like a rabbit. He took the lead, waving his hands non-stop. Countless palm shadows appeared in front of him, and the countless palm shadows turned into countless phantoms that were hard to discern with the naked eye. Yama's palm, ghost palm. Roar. As he swung his palm, ghosts wailed and wolves howled. I'm coming, Xiaomu shouted, attacking Fang Yen from the side. Xiaomu had an intense personality, so the moves he used were also unusually decisive and fierce. Bodhisattvas lowered their eyebrows, while arhats glared angrily. He punched out, his fist was biting cold and filled with fist intent. Arhat fist. The two brothers surrounded Fang Yen, one in front and one on the left, one soft and one hard. The black-clothed man stood where she was, her beautiful eyes looking at the battle in front of her, hesitating. After thinking for a moment, he finally gritted his teeth and charged toward Fang Yen, who was in the middle of the battle. Her arrival quickly filled up the position on the right, and the three of them formed a simple U-shaped encirclement around Fang Yen. Saber Monarch Luo Jin didn't give up. After taking a few deep breaths, he charged towards Fang Yen from behind with his chopping knife. His body was like a mountain, the tip of his knife rising. The third move of the saber manual, the boning knife. With one swing of the knife, the sky changed color. Surrounded by four experts, Fang Yan's body spun wildly like a top. The heart of Tai Chi had already been activated, and the Tai Chi domain had a panoramic view of their attacks. His body was already moving to the extreme. When the attacks from all four sides reached him at the same time, Fang Yan's body soared into the air with a whoosh. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A strong gust of wind was stirred up by him, like the long tail of a tornado. Fang Yan's body had just leaped up, dodging their first round of attacks, and then he pressed down with lightning speed. He flew above their heads, his legs like spears as he ruthlessly kicked at the top of the heads of the two brothers. He wanted to kick a hole through their skulls. Sensing danger, Xiaomu and Kongzhu quickly retreated. Pa! The force from their toes flew to the ground, smashing two deep holes in the hard stone ground. The two retreated, and the encirclement was immediately disbanded. Fang Yen flew up, and the saber monarch's boning knife followed suit. As Fang Yen descended, the boning knife immediately slashed at his genitals. The butcher dismembering ox technique. Fang Yen avoided the sharp edge of the boning knife. When his body reached a certain height, he kicked at the saber monarch's injured chest. Luo Jin had just been seriously injured, and his body was not as lively as before. Fang Yan's attack was as fast as lightning, and he had no way to dodge. His body was once again swept away by Fang Yen. When Fang Yen landed, only the black-clothed man was left in the battle. Fang Yen had originally wanted to chop at the black-clothed man's neck, but halfway through he withdrew his hand. When he withdrew his attack, the force from his hand tore off the black-clothed man's black veil. The black veil fluttered, and Fang Yen grabbed it. With his back to the black-clothed man, Fang Yen handed over the black veil in his hand, and said in a hoarse voice, "Cover your face again, I don't want to see your face." Chapter 577. A lonely pavilion, a gust of autumn wind. To the left of Single Sword Mountain, there was another perilous peak that stood side by side with Single Sword Peak. It was called Sword Cometh Peak. Sword Cometh Peak was not as tall and straight as the first Sword Peak, nor was it as steep and strange as the first Sword Peak. Therefore, many people would head straight to Single Sword Peak when they arrived at Single Sword Mountain. Very few people would even think of visiting Sword Cometh Peak. Sword Cometh Peak was a natural supporting role, a vassal of Single Sword Peak. However, Sword Cometh Peak was not lonely today, because it also welcomed travelers who knew how to appreciate it. If life is only like the first time we met, why does the autumn wind grieve the painting fan? The heart of an old friend is always changing, but the heart of an old friend is always changing. A young man in a black suit stood at the side of the gazebo, holding a high-powered telescope in his hand. He was looking at the top of one sword peak in the distance. He was reciting Nalen Rongroa's Ode of Milan, and it sounded like he was thinking about something else. No one answered, except for the whistling of the autumn wind and the rustling of the grass. Money can't buy a person's heart. The hardest thing to buy is the human heart. It's also the most volatile thing. The man in the suit sighed softly. He handed the binoculars in his hand to an old man in a black tang suit beside him, turned to look at a man in white behind him, and asked, "What do you think?" "This song is a bit too sad." The white-robed man's face was as clear as jade as he said calmly, "I prefer the lines, friends and relatives in Luoyang ask each other, a heart of ice in a jade pot. A piece of ice heart in the jade pot. How many people are willing to put their hearts in a jade pot?" The man in the suit sighed. "What about you? Is your ice heart in the jade pot?" "Young master, you know the answer," the white-robed man said. "I don't know the answer." The man in the suit shook his head. He glanced at everyone present and said, "The human heart is unpredictable. No matter how good I am at calculating, I can't calculate the human heart. What I want is nothing more than for everyone to work together to do something that will make us stand out from the crowd. Isn't it true that benefits are eternal?" The white-robed man smiled and said, "That is true, but it doesn't sound elegant, does it?" The man in the suit asked. "Young master is wise." "I'm not wise." The suited man shook his head. "I used to think I was smart." There were countless halos above his head, and he did a few things that he felt good about himself. At that time, he felt that he was unparalleled in the world and that nothing could stump him. The riches and honor of the human world are freely available. At this stage, it's very easy for people to lose control, and it's very easy for them to miss a step. Later, I met Fang Yen, a man I had to call an opponent. The slap in the face at the Maple Leaf Club was really memorable. For a long time, there was a bloody taste in my mouth. That slap had completely awakened me. It had pushed me down from midair, letting me know that I wasn't omnipotent and that I could also be knocked down by others. Most importantly, he told me not to underestimate anyone because there's a saying that goes, "It's better to be safe than sorry." Fang Yen hid in Swallow Dock for 3 years, but I was busy in the outside world for 3 years. To do a few more things, to succeed a few more times, because only by doing a lot of successful things would people forget the scene at the Maple Leaf Club. I wanted to wash away the shame. Later, I found out that I was wrong. No matter how many things you did, no matter how many times you succeeded, as long as you met Fang Yen, as long as someone mentioned Fang Yen, they would mention that failure and the fact that you're not as good as Fang Yen. Fang Yen had become a thorn in my side, a deep ravine that I had no choice but to face. So, when Fang Yen came to Huaqing, I also followed him to Huaqing. "Young master, Fang Yen is just a grasshopper after autumn. There are only a few days left until autumn. He won't be jumping around for much longer," a man in black said aloud. The suited man smiled silently and said, "See, even you don't believe that we can keep him here tonight?" "Young master, I didn't mean that." The man in black repeatedly denied. He knew that General Jun Xen was gloomy. If he let General Jun Xen bear a grudge against him, he probably wouldn't have a good life in the future. "We'll definitely keep him here tonight. He won't live to see tomorrow." The man in the suit waved his hand and said, "After I arrived at Huaqing, I clashed with Fang Yen a few times. We fought a few times in the open and in the dark. You all know the result. I lost terribly. I'm not as good as Fang Yen." Everyone's expression was ugly. They didn't know how to respond to Jiang Junling's words. Jiang Junling's heart was higher than the sky, and he was arrogant. He said that he was not as good as Fang Yen in front of his subordinates. What was he playing at? He couldn't be thinking of silencing them after saying those words, right? Don't you think it's ridiculous? Jiang Junling pointed at his own head and said, "When a person who only worshipped intelligence and thought that there was nothing that couldn't be solved with intelligence had to place all his hopes on force, it's really ironic. The longer I stay in Huaqing, the more disadvantageous my situation is. Right now, there are all kinds of rumors against me in Yanjing City. They say that I've been imprisoned by Fang Yen in Huaqing and can't advance or retreat. My brother must have done a lot of things behind the scenes." Everyone was silent. This was an internal conflict of the general family. It wasn't something outsiders like them could interfere in. That's why we're gathered here tonight. I don't like to walk at night. But tonight, I ran with you to this barren mountaintop. I thought I was prepared. I thought I prepared well enough. First, I let Senior Martial Addict waste his energy. Then, I sent enough people to ambush him. When he was at his weakest, I gave him a fatal blow. What was that silver light just now? Oh, someone told me that it was the light of Tai Chi. How ironic. His heart of Tai Chi has broken through again. Even the heavens are on his side? I don't believe in Buddha. I don't worship heaven and earth. I only believe in everything that I have. Jiang Junling pointed at his head again. And here, to me, this battle is very crucial. Very important. If we win, we will return with honor. If we lose, I will be hidden by the family and become an abandoned pawn. That's why. Jiang Junling bowed deeply to the people around him. Everyone hurriedly moved away. Who would dare to accept a 90-degree bow from this young master? Wouldn't that be shortening their lifespan? If they accept it now, then he might think about it and feel uncomfortable. Who knows, he might give you a hard time. Jiang Junling raised his head. His eyes shined as he looked at everyone. With an extremely serious tone, he said, "Everyone, you are my strongest friends. You are also my last hope. Please lend me your strength. Please lend me your luck. This battle we will definitely win. We will definitely win." Two young men in black said excitedly. A kind of excited feeling of a warrior dying for a bosom friend spread through their bodies. "We are willing to die for young master." The two silent old men who had been following by the General Ling's side all this while and had cultivated the silent Zen said. Because they had not spoken for far too long, their voices were dry and shriveled. However, their sincerity was enough to move one's heart. The white-robed man wore a wide-sleeved robe and held a long sword in his hand as he said with a faint smile, "We await young master's orders." Jiang Junling nodded at everyone, before angrily shouting, "Today, at this time, we will kill Fang Yen." Crash! Two men in black charged towards the foot of the mountain. Whoosh! The two men in black who had been following closely by Jiang Junling's side continuously flashed, before disappearing into the mountain forest. The long-robed man nodded at Jiang Junling with a faint smile. "Take care, young master." After speaking, he turned around and walked down the mountain. He used the word walk, but his footsteps were as swift as the wind. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of the two men in black. Sword Cometh Peak regained its tranquility once again. Only Jiang Junling was left guarding the old pavilion alone. Jiang Junling used a pair of binoculars to observe the world on the other side as he softly said, "The saying of Mount Li ends in the middle of the clear night, and the ringing bells of the night rain do not complain. How is it better to be a man in embroidered robes, to be together like a pair of wings and branches? It's really a sad thing for old friends to meet each other in arms. Cover your face again. I don't want to see your face." To think that Fang Yen would make such a request in the middle of an intense battlefield. Just how ugly and terrifying must his face be to make Fang Yen feel fear? Fang Yen handed the black veil over, but the black-clothed man did not reach out to take it. "You already knew who I was, right?" the man in black asked. His voice was light, and contained a little gentleness and coquettishness, like the whispers of a lover being blown over by the wind from afar. "There's no need for anyone I don't know to cover their face. What's the point of covering their face with a veil for someone I know?" Fang Yan's expression twitched as he did his best to suppress the churning anger and sadness in his heart, as well as the tears that threatened to spill out of his eyes. He was a man with a strong will, but when it came to emotions, he was as weak as a child. He did not know how to deal with such a situation. He hoped that these people were all strangers. They were all enemies who wanted to kill him. Only then would he feel at ease, and feel that it was only natural. "Yes, how could you not recognize me?" The man in black smiled soundlessly. Her eyes were red as large beads of tears rolled down her cheeks. "You're such a smart person, how could you not guess who I am? Only someone who wants to cover up would do such a stupid thing. I'm not stupid either, but I don't know why. but I still want to cover my face with a black cloth. Because I really don't know how to face you, not to mention you. Fang Yan gritted his teeth, his fingers deeply digging into the flesh of his palm. His eyes turned blood red, and the hostility in his heart accumulated to the highest point before exploding with a bang. His eyes coldly stared at the man in black, and his words pierced the heart. Why you? Chapter 578. Not to mention you. The first time I saw her, I had a confused feeling that my future wife should be this beautiful and cute. We played together, stole wine, hunted rabbits in the mountains, caught fish in the river, and hunted sparrows in the bamboo forest. I made flower garlands for you, taught you how to roll iron rings, made a chain gun for you, made a whip, and sharpened a top for you. I wrote love letters to you in vernacular and classical Chinese. I deliberately lost the fight with Yi Gentle for you. I stood in front of you with my head bleeding again and again. I just wanted to hear your reproach and comfort. I just wanted to see you hurriedly and deftly bandage my wounds. I took you to the top of the mountain to watch the red sun rise and all living things wake up. I took you to sit by the stone river and watch the sunset. I took you to see the spring breeze and spring rain. I took you to see the heavy snow and the cold winters stretching for thousands of miles. I asked you to take a walk by the river. I hid in the window of your room and told you jokes, sang, and danced. I told you my great but naive dream. I told you all my worries. I said that I didn't like kung fu. I preferred to write and read like my father. Everyone could only be young once, and they could only have their first love when they were young. I was willing to give you what I thought was the best because you were the person I liked. Because you were the person I liked for the first time. You were the person I liked when I knew I liked you. If you fell in love with someone, how could you have any reservations in front of her? You were willing to accompany her for eternity. You were willing to die for her. Why you? You refused my heart and refused to be with me. I don't blame you. I only blame myself for not being handsome enough, not smart enough, not hardworking enough, not despicable enough, not shameless enough, not good enough to get close to your heart. But why you? You stabbed me once when you refused me, and now you want to stab me again? What was it for? What was the reason? Was it just because I loved the wrong person? I liked you? I don't accept it. Fang Yan roared in his heart. But why should I be treated like this? Why does she want to kill me? And you, Yao, tell me why you? Fang Yan suddenly turned around, staring at the pretty face full of tears and roared. Why you? Why you? The redness in Fang Yan's eyes deepened, and his face turned purplish red because he was too emotional. His not-so-long hair stood up like an enraged hedgehog. The heart of Tai Chi spun naturally, trying to expel and suppress the evil chi that had boiled to the peak in his body again and again. However, not only did the evil chi not disappear, it accumulated more and more, and the speed at which it gathered was also getting faster and faster. Soon, the whirlpool of the Supreme Ultimate Core was enveloped by a layer of black. The heart of Tai Chi was covered in dust, so the Tai Chi realm naturally lost its effect. Sorry. The tears in the girl's eyes flowed faster and faster. Her voice was choked with sobs as she kept saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Why must it be you? Fang Yan looked at her tearful face and said with grief and indignation. He clenched his fists so tightly that his bones crackled. They already have so many people, are you still afraid that they won't be able to kill me? Even if you stand with them, even if you are also the mastermind, you hide in Yanjing and don't come, you hide behind a rock and don't show yourself, even if that's the case, it's fine. Why must you jump out yourself? Why must you let me see your face? Seeing you stand together with those executioners, Fang Yan, I'm sorry, the phoenix sobbed. She didn't know what to say. She had already come this far, what else could she say? She also didn't know what to explain. She had already stabbed him with her sword, what else was there to explain? Some things were done, some things were done, and some things were done. She made her choice, so she and Fang Yan also passed. She had hesitated before because she knew what the consequences of doing so were. She had considered for too long, she had calculated too much. But why did her heart feel so uncomfortable when she faced him? It was like using a knife to cut the heart into pieces, then pouring it into a measuring cup, adding water and ice and stirring it into juice. Pain, bitterness, coldness. Except for the words, "I'm sorry," she had already lost the ability to speak. "If you want me to answer, then it should be for you?" A clear and elegant voice came over. The voice came first, then a white light flashed. A white figure appeared in front of the two brothers, Kongzhu and Xiaomu. The white-robed man first nodded to Kongzhu and Xiaomu, then helped the fallen blade Lord Luo Jin up. Luo Jin kept vomiting blood, his face as pale as a ghost. It was clear that his internal injuries were extremely serious. The white-robed man placed one hand on Luo Jin's back, and then a warm current flowed into Luo Jin's body. Luo Jin only felt that his body was very comfortable, as if he was sunbathing. That warm current spread throughout his body, unblocking all the blood vessels and meridians that had been blocked because of his serious injuries. Bai Xiu's hand lightly patted him, and Luo Jin felt a wave of nausea in his chest. He opened his mouth again, wanting to vomit, but nothing came out. Only now did he feel comfortable all over. He felt that the turbid air that had been stuck in his chest for a long time had finally disappeared. "Thank you," Blade Lord Luo Jin said gratefully. On the battlefield of life and death, if someone was willing to lend a helping hand, then the favor was far too great. Perhaps in the future, he would have to take out something even more important to repay the favor. But this kind of help was hard to refuse. The white-robed man smiled, walking directly in front of the black-clothed man. He took out a piece of white silk from his pocket and gently wiped away the tears on the black-clothed man's face, saying softly, "See, I told you not to come, but you insisted on coming." The phoenix only cared about crying, unable to answer any questions. The white-robed man wiped away the tears on the phoenix's face, then put the handkerchief back into his pocket. Only then did he look seriously at Fang Yan, saying, "Long time no see." "Bai Xiu," Fang Yan said through gritted teeth. "Don't feel surprised." Bai Xiu silently smiled. His facial features were handsome, his posture calm, and when he smiled, two deep dimples could be seen. His long hair was loose, and he wore a white robe with wide sleeves. The long sword in his hand was simple and quiet, and the blade glowed with a green light. One look and anyone could tell that this was not an ordinary sword. It had to be said that this was indeed a very outstanding and charming man. If such a man were to wear this attire and sit in a coffee shop or walk on the street, who knew how many female perverts would drool and want to pin him against the wall? But this was Fang Yan's mortal enemy. How is it just a surprise? Fang Yan laughed coldly. It's a huge surprise. In the past, people said that the scholar Bai Xiu was the most arrogant person in Swallow Fort, but those who said this must not know that Bai Xiu is also a lackey of someone else. Isn't this too disappointing? I am not the most arrogant person in Swallow Fort, and I should not underestimate my enemy. Who else is more arrogant than him? Also, when you say someone else, are you referring to the Jiang family? Bai Xiu asked. The Jiang family is not worthy of me being their lackey. Then who is it? Fang Yan, don't you know anything? Bai Xiu looked at Fang Yan and asked with a trace of pity in his eyes. I only know what I should know, Fang Yan said. Bai Xiu, don't make yourself out to be so great and superior. You're just a lackey of the Jiang family. What? You don't want to admit this fact? You don't want to admit that you actually listened to an idiotic megalomaniac like Jiang Junling? Scholar Bai Xiu, have all the books you've read gone into a dog's stomach? Bai Xiu shook his head and sighed. It seems that you really don't know. What do I need to know? Since you don't know, then don't ever know. Bai Xiu said with a comforting expression, do you know what the happiest animal in this world is? Is this guy retarded? Why is he asking such a childish question at this time? Why do I have to waste time answering your question? Besides, what's the happiest animal in the world? Is it a cat? Crawling all over its mistress's chest all day long, giving it a foot massage when it's free. It's a pig, Bai Xiu said. When humans think, God laughs. A pig doesn't think about anything. It eats, sleeps, and eats. In the end, it's stabbed through the neck. If the butcher's knife skills are good enough, it won't be a painful death. Look, isn't being a pig very blissful? Why don't you be a pig? Does Swallow Doc know what you're doing? Fang Yin asked. This was the question he was most concerned about and wanted to know the answer to. Phoenix was here, and so was Bai Xiu. Then, who else from Swallow Doc was involved? Most importantly, was Sir involved in this? If Mr. was also involved, was he representing his own position or Swallow Doc's? There were too many questions that needed answers, too many puzzles that needed to be solved. Fang Yen felt like dark clouds were roiling above his head. His world was completely dark. Not a single ray of light could enter. For the first time, Fang Yen felt like his IQ wasn't enough. Those who should know, those who don't know, Bai Xiu said. He looked at Fang Yen with a smile and said, what you want to know the most is whether or not Mr. is involved in this plan, right? Chapter 579. If it was just Bai Xiu, things wouldn't have reached the point of no return. If even the teacher stood on the other side and became the real mastermind behind this sure-kill situation, then things would become confusing and incomparably dangerous. The teacher wasn't just the teacher, he was also Swallow Doc. Swallow Doc was Fang Yan's home. Would even his own family want to kill him? Phoenix could only be counted as half a member of Swallow Doc. Her appearance couldn't represent Swallow Doc's position, but it could represent the Yin family's position. Fang Yen didn't have much contact with the Yin family, and had only greeted his parents a few times. They looked cold and unapproachable, so how could they want to kill him? Bai Xiu was a member of Swallow Doc, and was even a very important person there. He was a capable candidate to be the next teacher of Swallow Doc. Now that he stood up and expressed his position, was his position also the teacher's position? Bai Xiu understood Fang Yen. Just as he said, this was what Fang Yen was most concerned about. What was the teacher's position? Did the teacher want Fang Yen to die, or did he want Fang Yen to live a life worse than death? Bai Xiu could represent the teacher to a certain extent, but Bai Xiu couldn't represent the teacher. Hearing Bai Xiu's words, Fang Yen said in a low voice, yes, this is the question I want to ask. It is also the thing I am most concerned about. With such a big scene tonight, everyone who should have come is here, and those who shouldn't have come are here to join in the fun. Phoenix's expression was extremely sorrowful, and her tears flowed even more happily. She really shouldn't have come. Coming here was asking for abuse. Fang Yen could mock her, scold her, and even kill her, but she could only keep saying, sorry, to him. Why bother? Fang Yan's eyes were like knives as he stared at Bai Xiu's face. Just like the most famous, if eyes could really kill, Fang Yen would have already chopped Bai Xiu into meat paste and made dumplings. Fang Yen hated Phoenix, but he didn't want to hate Phoenix. Because when he hated the woman he deeply loved, not only did the pain not lessen, but it also made him feel 10 times, 100 times worse than not hating her. Therefore, Fang Yen placed his hatred on Bai Xiu. Bai Xiu, you almost never step out of Swallow Dock, but this time you came all the way to Solitary Sword Mountain to ambush me and take my head. But Bai Xiu, if you weren't a dog of the Jiang family, who ordered you to run out and bite people? Bai Xiu, if you weren't a dog of the Jiang family, then who ordered you to run out and bite people? Many years ago, I knew that I wasn't good with words, so I didn't like to talk most of the time, especially to you. Language is also a kind of ability, and I'm not as good as you in this aspect. We're from the same hometown, yet you're not even willing to give me an answer? Fang Yen pointed at the encirclement around him, pointed at Bai Xiu, pointed at Diablo and Xiu Mu, and even pointed at the Blade Lord Luo Jin, who was still holding his saber and maintaining his battle stance. The situation is very clear. Even if the gods come to save me, it will be useless. The current situation is a dead end for me. Bai Xiu, can't you let me die knowing? Fang Yen didn't point at the phoenix. He couldn't bear to look at it, and he didn't dare to. He treated the phoenix as an invisible person, although at this moment, his heart was in so much pain that he couldn't breathe. So what? No matter how painful it was, he had to endure it. No matter how cold it was, he had to endure it. His life was more important. I'm not obliged to explain to the dead. That's the king of hell's business. Bai Xiu raised the sword in his hand and said, "My duty is to send you to hell." Fang Yan sneered. Such a line was really uncultured. Who knew where it was plagiarized from? Bai Xiu, you've been waiting for this day for a long time, haven't you? Fang Yan said with a face full of ridicule. You used to be the most popular young hero of Swallow Fort, the focus of everyone's praise. Although Yi Rou has the reputation of being the #1 in the younger generation of the Jianghu, many people always thought that it was because you didn't want to fight with women. Unexpectedly, Fang Yan, was a genius, comprehending the heart of Tai Chi at such a young age. I immediately stole your limelight and glory, becoming the most popular man in Swallow Fort. Your state of mind is out of balance. Jealousy turned to hatred. You've wanted to kill me for a long time, right? Come, Bai Xiu. Use your full strength and come at me with your companions. Keep me here so that I won't be able to walk out of Solitary Sword Mountain. From now on, you will be the #1 in the younger generation of Swallow Fort, and no one will compete with you. Bai Xiu slowly put down the sword in his hand. He looked at Fang Yan with a serious face and said, "Originally, I didn't want them to accompany me in the attack, because I think it's a bit undignified. No matter what, we're all from Swallow Fort. Even if there's any conflict, it should be solved by us using Swallow Fort's method. That's right." Fang Yan shouted sternly, "Let's go down the mountain, find a tavern, order a few boxes of white wine, and fight to the death." Swallow Fort's way of solving problems was to compete in drinking. For example, Fang Yan and Li Xiaotian had some kind of quarrel, or Fang Yan stole Zhu Zaidan's crocodile about a hunt for game to ambush the phoenix. Fang Yan's heart ached again. Why was it the phoenix again? Whenever the companions of Swallow Fort encountered any problems that needed to be solved, they would find a place with no one around to compete in drinking. They would bring a few bottles of Shaozi, one for each, and drink to their heart's content. The loser would listen to the winner, and the winner could apologize or continue to curse. Because their alcohol tolerance was not as good as Fang Yan's, Fang Yan would always be the winner. This way of solving problems was surprisingly effective. They were still as close as brothers, and never had any conflicts. Bai Xiu knew that Swallow Fort had this tradition, but he was not one of Fang Yan's companions. He didn't expect Fang Yan to propose such a despicable and shameless plan. If everyone went down the mountain to a tavern, Fang Yan would probably be so far gone that he wouldn't even be able to see his shadow. At that time, forget about killing him. Even if they wanted to scold him, he wouldn't listen. Bai Xiu's expression stiffened slightly, then he smiled bitterly and said, "I'm afraid I can't agree. If there's alcohol, I don't mind having a drink with you. I'm afraid there won't be a chance in the future." "Bai Xiu, your life is so boring," Fang Yan said viciously. "You used to be so pretentious, and now you're so timid. Are you tired?" "Tired? So tired," Bai Xiu said with a smile. "So I might as well kill someone to relieve my tiredness." As soon as Bai Xiu finished speaking, he raised his sword and prepared to charge at Fang Yan again. "Bai Xiu." The phoenix grabbed the corner of Bai Xiu's clothes. Bai Xiu tugged hard, but he couldn't pull it away. Bai Xiu could only turn around and look at the phoenix's tear-stained face. He said softly, "I know what you're thinking, so I didn't want you to know about these dirty things. I don't know where you heard this news, but you actually secretly came to Flower City by yourself. Fang Yan is a smart guy. If you keep reminding him, he might notice something. If you ruin this plan, how are you going to explain it to your family? Why would they let you go? You've already made your choice from the beginning, so why can't you make up your mind at the crucial moment? We are very powerful and we can change many things, but we can't change fate. The current situation is the fate of you and Fang Yan." "Bai Xiu, what's the point of you standing here? You came for him, you want to say goodbye to him, you're afraid that he'll be killed. You always feel that you should see it happen with your own eyes. Even if he dies, he should die in front of your own eyes. But do you know that because you're standing here, the person most likely to kill him is actually you?" Bai Xiu, one of the phoenix's hands tightly gripped Bai Xiu's sleeve, afraid that if she let go, he would attack with his sword. She was very, very sad. She was very, very sad. She was sobbing uncontrollably. She was crying so hard that her entire body was trembling, as if she was about to stop breathing. Bai Xiu once again took out a handkerchief from his pocket and carefully wiped the tears off Phoenix's face. He advised, "Go back. This place isn't suitable for you." "Bai Xiu, I'm sorry," Phoenix said in a trembling voice as she threw herself into Bai Xiu's arms. As she spoke, the long sword in her left hand suddenly pierced toward Bai Xiu's abdomen. Chi! The long sword didn't pierce through Bai Xiu's abdomen. Instead, Bai Xiu caught it in his hand. A long gash appeared on Bai Xiu's palm by the sharp blade of the sword, and red blood sprayed out like a fountain. No one had expected such a scene to occur. "This stinking whore," Xiu Mu flew into a rage and cursed angrily. "She's actually a spy on Fang Yan's side." They had just fought with Fang Yan and had already figured out Fang Yan's strength. Especially that silver arm of light that appeared at the end, it was even more confusing. Bai Xiu was a new force on their side, and also the main force that intercepted Fang Yan. If Bai Xiu was stabbed or killed by Phoenix's sword, how could they complete the task of keeping Fang Yan at Solitary Sword Mountain? Damn! Kongzhu flew into a rage and slapped toward Phoenix's back. Bai Xiu waved his sleeves and dispersed the overlapping palm shadows that Kongzhu had sent over. Saber Monarch's eyes were cold, and he looked thoughtfully at Bai Xiu, who was holding Phoenix in his arms. Bai Xiu held the long sword in one hand and the blade of Phoenix's long sword in the other. He looked at Phoenix tenderly and said, "You don't understand me, but I understand you very well. When you say sorry, it means that you will really do something that will let others down." Chapter 580. You would only take the initiative to get to know someone if you liked someone. If you didn't like someone, that person would always be a passerby. You could lie to someone about anything, but loving someone or not was as easy as drinking water. "You don't know me, but I know you very well." Bai Xiu said this in a relaxed and natural manner, but how much hardship and regret did he have in his heart? Phoenix was only Fang Yan's first love, but she was Bai Xiu's girlfriend. His own girlfriend stabbed herself for someone else's boyfriend. Such a thing was rare in this world, right? Fang Yan could only blame Phoenix for being ruthless, because Phoenix had never given him any promises. However, Bai Xiu had the right to reprimand Phoenix for her betrayal. Sigh. Bai Xiu sighed deeply and said, "Don't ever say sorry to anyone in the future, at least not to me, Bai Xiu." Phoenix was already in tears, and her voice was already starting to hiccup. Everything that she had experienced today was a nightmare to her. The cruelest and most heartless nightmare. However, even so, she still didn't want to wake up, because no matter how terrifying a dream was, it was ultimately a dream. Everything that happened in the dream was fake and illusory. If it was reality, there would be blood and deaths. She couldn't accept such an outcome. Although she had thought about it 100 times, made up her mind 100 times, and decided to take on everything 100 times, wasn't the reason why there were 100 times because she hadn't thought it through, hadn't made up her mind, and couldn't take on everything? You rushed over for him. No matter how much your heart ached, he already understood your feelings. Bai Xiu hugged Shangxin's body tightly with one arm and said in a calm and gentle voice, "When you stabbed me, the best place to stab me was actually my heart. However, you only stabbed my stomach. This proved that you didn't want to kill me, but only wanted to injure me." A hint of bitterness appeared on Bai Xiu's face as he said, "For so many years, everyone thought that I had won. They thought that I was the winner on the battlefield of love. However, I knew that I had lost and Fang Yan was the real winner. Even though everyone knew that you were my girlfriend, you had never held my hand when we were alone. It's only when we meet Fang Yan that you take the initiative to hold my hand. What do you want to prove? You want to tell Fang Yan to give up on me, that the person I like is Bai Xiu. You're also telling yourself to stop letting your imagination run wild. The person you're going to choose is Bai Xiu. You're just doing that to strengthen your belief in Fang Yan and yourself. Why is it necessary to be firm? If you like it, then you like it. If you don't like it, then you don't like it. Why do you need to be firm? Because in your heart, you still care more about Fang Yan. Although because of your family standpoint, you can only exclude him. But have you ever thought about what I am? What am I? Bai Xiao gently kissed Phoenix's black hair fluttering in the wind and said, "Am I also a proud person? I also have the self-esteem of a man. The time I liked the most was when I walked shoulder to shoulder with you by the stone river. The time I felt the most sad was when you suddenly ran over and held my hand. Because I knew that Fang Yan must be coming. I don't have any experience in love, and I don't know what love is. But I read in a book that when you are with the person you like the most, she is your independent kingdom. Your line of sight is imprisoned by her, and you can't come into contact with anything outside. My eyes only have you, and your eyes are always the first to discover traces of Fang Yan. My martial arts are better than yours. If someone else comes close, shouldn't I be the first to discover it? What I'm grateful for is that your sword didn't stab my heart in the end. This is the best reward for my efforts, right?" Bai Xiao. Phoenix's legs were weak, and her body softly leaned against Bai Xiao's chest. The sword in her hand couldn't stab down, nor could it fall. Her hand holding the sword was shaking, but because Bai Xiao's hand was holding the sword, one end of the sword was still fixed in Phoenix's palm. Is it loyalty to your family or loyalty to your own feelings? Everyone will be in a dilemma when they encounter this kind of problem. Is it disloyal, unfilial, or heartless? It's hard for me to decide when I encounter this kind of thing. No matter what choice you make, it's wrong. You coming here is a mistake. Bai Xiao lightly patted Phoenix's shoulder and took the sword from her trembling hand. His eyes were gentle, and his voice was filled with infinite affection as he said, "You're too tired. Go back and rest well. When you wake up, everything will be over." Bai Xiao, don't. Phoenix hugged Bai Xiao tightly, her voice sorrowful and pleading. Bai Xiao smiled bitterly and said, "You see, you're making things difficult for me again. I've never refused any of your requests, but this time, I can only disappoint you." Bai Xiao pushed Phoenix's body away from him, looked at Phoenix's collapsed body on the ground, and said, "Go back. Don't let me see you cry, and don't let him see you cry. You look very ugly when you cry." Phoenix shook her head. She didn't want to leave. But if she didn't leave, what else could she do? She watched as they plotted step by step to lure Fang Yan into the insect, but she couldn't bear to see him die. She wanted to stab Bai Xiao so that Fang Yan could escape with less resistance, but her actions were seen through by Bai Xiao. Not only did she fail to save Fang Yan, but she also hurt this man who had wholeheartedly loved and cared for her for many years. And Xiao, she roared angrily in her heart. She felt that the owner of this name was the world's stupidest, most selfish, and most despicable woman. She hated herself. A deep-rooted hatred. While Bai Xiao was pacifying Phoenix, the other generals by Jiang Junling's side had all arrived. Two tall men in suits stood there like two towering mountains, two old men in gray robes with shriveled cheeks who didn't say a word, the two brothers Kongzhu and Xiao Mu whose strength seemed to have not been depleted, and the saber monarch Luo Jin, who had recovered his energy for a short period of time and was once again on guard, ready to enter the battle at any time. These people surrounded Fang Yan in the middle, forming a human wall that could both attack and defend. Bai Xiao's hand was bleeding profusely. He used the handkerchief he had used to wipe Phoenix's tears to simply bandage his hand. His movements were simple and practiced. It seemed that he had done this kind of thing many times before. After the wound on his hand was tightly bandaged, Bai Xiao once again raised his long sword and looked at Fang Yan, who was in the middle of the battle, and asked with a smile, "How much have you recovered?" Bai Xiao's guess was correct. Fang Yan was indeed resting. He was resting when he was talking to Bai Xiao, he was resting when he was distressed by Phoenix, and he was resting when Phoenix stopped Bai Xiao from comforting Phoenix. Just now, in the battle with martial maniac Hou Zhendong at the summit of Single Sword Peak, Fang Yan had expended too much energy and essence. Martial maniac Hou Zhendong was one of the world's top experts, and one of Hua Xia's 7 maniacs. His entire body was covered in cracks, and it was true that Fang Yan felt a great deal of pressure. If Fang Yan hadn't won through trickery, The two of them might have fought to the death. But even though Fang Yan had won in the end, his energy was almost completely depleted. Thus, he needed energy. If he wanted to break out of the encirclement, he needed an intense battle. At the very least, these people in front of him wouldn't let him go so easily. 70%, Fang Yan said. His essence, qi, and spirit had only recovered to 40%. Just now, when he received Saber Lord's firewood cleaver, the silvery white crystals that appeared out of nowhere had almost drained all the energy in his body. Even if Fang Yan had the aid of the Taiji heart, which could speed up his body's recovery, he had only recovered 40% of his energy. Up until now, he had only recovered 40% of his previous strength and will. His body was empty, and his will was exhausted. How could he win this battle? Of course, he wouldn't tell Bai Xiu the truth. Bai Xiu was a narcissist. Why would he ask such an idiotic question? Bai Xiu smiled and nodded. 70% is just right. You can kill me without letting others think that you're bullying me. 70% is indeed just right. Fang Yan sneered. That's right. Bai Xiu nodded. My opponent is too weak. He's not worth my attack. Fang Yan was furious. He glared at Bai Xiu fiercely and said, "What right do you have to say that I'm not worth your attack? Come, let's fight one-on-one." He pointed at Kongzhu, Xiumu, and the others and said, "None of you attack. I want to see how strong this idiot is. In my opinion, he's the weakest among you all." No one answered. No one left the encirclement. Fang Yan sighed in his heart. The times had changed. The people's intelligence had increased. There were fewer idiots. Even the performance of swindlers wasn't as good as before. Bai Xiu calmly looked at everyone and loudly said, "Everyone, time is of the essence. Let us join hands and kill this brat. That's how it should be." Kongzhu agreed. This brat has picked up a great bargain. Being surrounded by so many of us is a great blessing in life. Let's begin, no more chatter, the bulky black-clothed man roared. Shameless! Fang Yan cursed. Thank you. Before Bai Xiu finished speaking, he and his sword had already disappeared from their original positions. Before he could even reappear, a silvery white sword ray descended from the sky. Like a bolt of lightning, it enveloped the space above Fang Yan's head. Rumble, lightning, thunder. A single strike of the sword could cause lightning. This was the supreme secret of swordsmanship. Chapter 581. Too careless. They were all heroes and swordsmen of the martial arts world, and fairness was the most important thing when they came out. When a Western knight encountered a major event like his wife being stolen, he would just throw a pair of white gloves at the other party and yell, "I want to fight you one-on-one," and then be killed by the other party. When Fang Yan was young, his favorite thing to do was to take Li Xiaotian, Zhu Ziden, and a group of friends to fight one-on-one with others. Whoever they didn't like would be picked on by a group of people, neat and tidy, and extremely refreshing. Every dog has its day. He didn't expect that there would be a day when he would be picked by a group of people. Bai Xiu took the lead and was the first to rush at Fang Yan with his sword. He used a killing move right from the start. The teacher was good with the sword, and his thunder roar was impenetrable. Bai Xiu was the teacher's disciple, so he was also good with the sword. The teacher once said, "Bai Xiu is good with the sword, better than me." At that time, everyone thought that the teacher was being modest, or trying to force his disciple to take the position. Because of this sentence, Fang Yan cursed the teacher for being shameless many times in his heart. Even if you want your disciple to take over, you don't have to say such shameless words of praise, right? However, Bai Xiu's strength had always been a big secret in Swallow Fort. Everyone knew that Bai Xiu was strong, but they didn't know how strong he was. Bai Xiu wore loose clothes. He liked to read. He liked to read ancient books. He wasn't competitive, didn't show off, and treated people gently and elegantly. Almost no one had ever heard of him getting angry with anyone, except Bai Xiu. The most valuable reference was when Bai Xiu wrote a love letter to Yu Rou when he was young and naive. In the end, he was beaten up by Yu Rou, who was cold and merciless. Hence, Yi Rou became the strongest player in the game, and Bai Xiu was known as the most outstanding man among the younger generation in the game. Of course, there were many people who were not convinced by this saying that Bai Xiu deliberately admitted defeat because a good man didn't fight with a woman, and that he just didn't want to fight to the death with Yi Rou, so he let her win. Bai Xiu wasn't Fang Yan, he wouldn't fight for those meaningless titles. Bai Xiu was Mr's disciple. Because of Mr., there were still many bootlickers who stood up to speak up for Bai Xiu. Why does Fang Yan hate Bai Xiu so much? Not only was it because Bai Xiu had snatched away his first love, Phoenix, but also because his brainless fans were deliberately belittling themselves while praising Bai Xiu. What did I do to provoke you? Why do you have to step on me like this to show off your noble character and unquestionable integrity? Therefore, Fang Yan asked Zhu Ziden and Li Xiaotian to keep spreading rumors in Swallow Dock, saying that Bai Xiu had used shameless means to snatch the phoenix from him, and that he had tried to attack Yi Rou's breasts when he was fighting with her. As a result, Yi Rou had beaten him badly and made him beg for mercy. Bai Xiu looked like a gentleman on the surface, but in fact he was a despicable, shameless, and obscene hooligan. Although the fabricated words were a little exaggerated, it still attracted a lot of hatred for Bai Xiu. Yi Rou was the goddess of Swallow Dock at that time. The goddess was there for everyone to look up to. It was wrong of you to reach out and touch her. Bai Xiu's sword did not rise or fall. He was elegant and unrestrained, and his movements were unpredictable. You couldn't see him make a move, and suddenly a sword flew over. You also couldn't see the blade of his sword, and you didn't know whether the long sword in his hand was stabbing your skull, eyes, nose, mouth, throat, or chest, or any other important body part. There was a flash of lightning like a long snake, and there was a roar like thunder. Rumble, the long snake seemed to have grown eyes, and it circled above Fang Yan's head. Countless cyclones pressed down on Fang Yan's head. Fang Yan felt the air around him being sucked out, and even breathing became difficult. Hiss! The long snake in the cyclone sprang out, opened its bloody mouth, and tore at Fang Yan's head. It looked like it was going to bite off Fang Yan's head. Whoosh! Fang Yan used the heart of Tai Chi, and forcibly broke out of the cyclone's lock. He took a step to the left, and then rushed to the right. Pa! The cyclone smashed into the stones on the ground, and the stones were smashed into pieces, and a deep pit appeared in the ground. Bai Xiu's attack missed, and he didn't give Fang Yan the slightest chance to breathe. His figure finally appeared, right in front of Fang Yan. The sword in his hand swung upwards, and he directly struck Fang Yan's crotch. Sword chi overflowed, and thunder rumbled. This strike wasn't as dazzling as the first strike, but it was even more majestic. There was no lightning, but there was a hissing flame. There was no thunder, but there was a muffled roar as if it came from the 9 heavens above. Thunderclap's sword covers the moon. Damn! Fang Yan roared in his heart. The Thunderclap sword brought along countless cyclones, and they were so fast that they obscured his vision, making it difficult for him to distinguish the sword's style and angle with his naked eye. If this strike landed, Fang Yan would be cut in half from his crotch. Fang Yan didn't want to die, and he didn't want to be dismembered. The injury of his first girlfriend, the killing of his rival from the same village, this meticulously designed sure-kill situation, and the hidden hands behind the scenes. Fang Yan was filled with hatred for everything that had happened to him. The Taiji core still maintained its frenzied spinning, and it hadn't stopped even now. As Fang Yan's hatred soared, the hostility around the Taiji core began to gather again. They were repelled and kicked out by the Taiji core, but they didn't want to show weakness and continued to invade the Taiji core. Ice and fire couldn't fuse, and good and evil couldn't coexist. As soon as the hostility neared the Taiji core, it was immediately kicked away by the pure Taiji core. When it neared again, it was kicked away again. Again and again, like a moth flying into a flame. Whoosh! When he tried again, a trace of hostility was actually sucked in by the Taiji core's cyclone. That hostility was very small, but it was extremely conspicuous in the Taiji core that was filled with pure energy. It was like a sesame seed on a white bread, or a mole on a beauty's face. It was easy to overlook, and easy to remember. The Taiji core, which had been humiliated, spun even faster, like an enraged wild dog. Like a madman, it roared and bared its fangs, wanting to attack the enemy. It wouldn't stop until the enemy was dead. Fang Yan's eyes couldn't see, but he could use the Taiji realm to find the trajectory of Bai Xiu's thunderclap sword. Fang Yan found the thunderclap sword, found the lightning snake that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws but didn't make any sound, like it was trapped in a glass bottle and couldn't escape. Fang Yan used the most magical and ingenious drunken crane riding the wind. As his body leaned forward, he reached out to grab the sword. He wanted to neutralize the power of the thunderclap sword, then break into Bai Xiu's inner courtyard and hit his heart. Got it. Fang Yan was overjoyed. He felt the hot sword blade. The blade was boiling hot because it had been infused with too much energy, as if it had just been taken out of a furnace. Fang Yan first used the Taiji Dispel word formula to neutralize the power of the thunderclap sword. Then he used the Taiji Absorb word formula and Entangle word formula at the same time. After flipping his wrist dozens of times, he successfully snatched the thunderclap sword from Bai Xiu's hand. A perfect empty-handed snatch of a white blade. Although he felt that something wasn't right, his brain was still driven and overshadowed by the strong desire to win. Fang Yan's body still maintained a charging posture, the sword in his hand turned around, preparing to stab Bai Xiu's chest and give him a fatal blow. Blood. Only blood could extinguish the hatred in his heart, only blood could cover up the violent energy that was about to burst out of his body. Fang Yan wanted to kill. Fang Yan stepped on drunken crane riding the wind, one hand holding the unfettered palm, the other holding the limitless sword, and charged at Bai Xiu like a mad dog. He wanted to kill Bai Xiu, just like how Bai Xiu wanted to kill him. At the same time, Kongzhu's Yama palm slapped toward Fang Yan's left side with a force that could topple mountains and overturn the seas. The palm shadows were vague, like a dream or illusion. It was difficult to distinguish between real and fake, and it was difficult to dodge. Xiumu had a bad temper. Although he was the first to charge out, and the second person to attack Fang Yan after Bai Xiu, his brother beat him to it. This made Xiumu lose face, and he cursed and swore, but no one knew what he was saying. But he clenched his fists, and his fists suddenly turned scarlet red. After expanding several times, he suddenly punched toward Fang Yan's back. Arhat subduing demons. The two old consecrators who had accompanied Jiang Junling all year round also moved. Their faces were so shriveled and old, but their speed was so fast and ghostly, and their moves were so deep and majestic. The two of them worked together and attacked at the same time. One used chess pieces. 9 black chess pieces, 9 white chess pieces. The 18 chess pieces lined up in the air in the shape of a 3, covering more than 160 acupoints on Fang Yan's body. The other person held a copper plate in his hand, which was used to hold the chess pieces. The plate flew out of his hand, broke through the airflow, and started to spin. Then, with a whistling sound, it smashed toward the lower half of Fang Yan's body. Buzz, buzz, buzz. As the plate spun, it emitted a righteous and grand Buddhist sound. Countless buzzing sounds came together, like the voice of an enlightened monk who was chanting Amitabha at lightning speed. Every time the copper plate spun, it was exactly a complete Amitabha chant, shattering one's fighting spirit and breaking one's state of mind. The two men in suits, who were as tall as hills, also attacked. Their speed could not keep up with the others, so they could only take out weapons from their pockets. Yes, they had brought weapons. Guns. 2 black pistols. This was a collision between ancient martial arts experts, a fight between energies. There were also firearms. This was a song of ice and fire. Chapter 582. The gun was called Proud World, an ace-calibrated pistol produced in Russia. Proud World was originally the standard gun for members of the Russian royal family. Later, when the royal family suffered a disaster, the technology to make Proud World pistols also spread to the outside world. It became the pistol of choice for black market assassins. Every gun was handmade, precisely calibrated, and could be modified according to the customer's requirements. Of course, the price was not cheap. Each gun was worth tens of thousands of gold. They pulled off the safety of the gun and began to search for Fang Yan's body that had already become a blur. At any time, a destructive bullet could be shot out. Fang Yan was surrounded by several experts and attacked by a group of people. However, Fang Yan did not care about his surroundings. He wanted to stab Bai Xiu. He must stab Bai Xiu this time. Infinitely close. Fang Yan held the thunderclap sword and stabbed toward Bai Xiu's heart. As long as he stabbed down, Bai Xiu's heart would be pierced. Moreover, the true qi on the blade would blast his heart into a pile of unmanageable meat paste. Goodbye, Bai Xiu's lips squirmed. Although he did not make a sound, Fang Yan knew that he wanted to say this word. Goodbye? Why goodbye? Yes, goodbye indeed. After Fang Yan's sword slashed down, he and Bai Xiu would never meet again. But shouldn't he be the one saying this? Fang Yan was very angry and expressed his strong dissatisfaction with Bai Xiu's act of stealing his lines. When they said goodbye, their bodies were about to collide with each other. Bai Xiu's face had a smile of relief and a smile of success. I've been tricked. Fang Yan was shocked. He finally knew what was wrong. It should not be so easy. Bai Xiu's strength was not so easy to neutralize. Bai Xiu's thunderclap sword was not so easy to take away. He relied on the heart of Tai Chi and thought that he could see all the trajectories of his sword. But how could Bai Xiu be so easy to defeat? He resisted with all his might but secretly left a backup plan. It was to give Fang Yan a fatal blow at this moment. Fang Yan understood. However, it was already too late. Lightning flashed in Bai Xiu's hand. It turned out that Bai Xiu had purposely let Fang Yan snatch the thunderclap sword, and used his palm to receive the sword qi contained within the thunderclap sword. Fang Yan manipulated the white lightning and fiercely stabbed towards Fang Yan's chest. The sound of the sword qi cutting through flesh could be heard. There was also the smell of burning clothes and the smell of oil after the flesh was cooked. When Bai Xiu stabbed the entire lightsaber into Fang Yan's chest, their bodies quickly overlapped and collided heavily. Bang! Just as Fang Yan's body was about to be sent flying, Bai Xiu pulled him back. Fang Yan endured the pain in his chest and wanted to stab the thunderclap sword into Bai Xiu's body according to his original plan. Whoosh! Bai Xiu flicked his wrist and the thunderclap sword leaped into his hand as if it had a life of its own. Fang Yan's strength had been greatly reduced in the battle with Martial Fanatic, and he had also repeatedly fought with Sword Monarch, Kong Zhu and the others. His spirit had been greatly reduced and he had not recovered until now. In terms of strength, he was no match for Bai Xiu at his peak. Whoosh! Bai Xiu flicked his wrist and drew out 7 fiery red sword flowers. The 7 sword flowers flickered with dazzling light, illuminating the faces of the people around them of all shapes and sizes. 7 flowers with 1 sword, a sword Dao Grandmaster. Bai Xiu is so young, yet he already has the cultivation of a sword Dao Grandmaster. The gray-robed man in the distance was full of amazement. With an appreciative smile, he said, "From this, it can be seen that he is indeed extremely talented in sword Dao. A great teacher produces a great disciple. A disciple taught by a teacher naturally won't be too bad." For some reason, seeing Bai Xiu trick Fang Yan and stab the thunderclap sword into Fang Yan's body, Martial Fanatic felt very uncomfortable. It was as if the sword had been stabbed into his body. Although at the very beginning he was the primer in this sure-kill situation, the most crucial figure. Just now, in order to complete the mission, he had battled with Fang Yan at the top of One Sword Peak, exhausting a lot of Fang Yan's energy. However, this did not hinder his appreciation and love for Fang Yan. If the two of them fought fairly, I don't think Fang Yan would lose. I had already used up 60 to 70% of Fang Yan's strength. After that, he was besieged by several experts and betrayed by his former lover. His body and morale were at their lowest. Otherwise, just the Taiji light he displayed earlier would be enough to beat Bai Xiu into a pile of dog shit. You should know that the Taiji light is rare for hundreds of years, but in the past 100 years, Bai Xiu was not the only one to use the thunderclap sword well. Even teacher is better than him. The gray-robed man heard the contempt in martial fanatic's words and said with a smile, "Why? Do you want to stand up for that kid?" "I still feel that it's unfair." "Fair? Is there such a thing as fairness in this world? I taught you the fairy scattering flowers, but I didn't teach it to anyone else. Isn't this unfair to others? Also, you guys underestimate Bai Xiu's ability to hide and endure. The focus of the thunderclap sword is not the sword, but the thunder. The lightning after the thunder. In the fight just now, Fang Yan was not prepared for this move. It can be seen that Bai Xiu had never used it when fighting others. Or rather, all the opponents who saw him using the sword were killed by him. Is a young man who is brave, cunning, and able to keep a low profile not worthy of our nurturing and love? The gray-robed man glanced at martial fanatic and said, "I understand how you feel. It is indeed a little sad to witness the fall of a heaven's favorite, but we have long let go of matters of life and death. Advancing in the path of martial arts, stepping into another world, this is what we seek. Knowing the truth in the morning, one can die without regrets. Furthermore, the winner is the king, the loser is the bandit. Today's outcome has already been decided, there is nothing to be regretful about." Fang Yan was a genius. However, in this battle against Bai Xiu, he was ultimately killed by the other party. He is not as good as Bai Xiu. Why? Martial fanatic was unwilling to accept this. What happened back then? Why did you have to go this far? Not only what happened back then, but also what's happening now. The gray-robed man coldly laughed. Who told him to be a member of the Fang clan? Who told him to be Mo Qingdi's disciple? Who told him to be Fang Yan? I'm just afraid it's too much, martial fanatic sighed. Fang Yan was stabbed in the chest, spitting out blood. That sword had pierced through his body, and it had also drained the strength from his body. His body softly leaned against Bai Xiu's chest. The two of them were like a couple snuggling up to each other. Bai Xiu raised his wrist. The thunderclap sword in his hand was about to stab into Fang Yan's back. Sha! The clear sound of flesh being cut was heard. Blood splattered everywhere. It splashed onto Fang Yan's face, as well as Bai Xiu's face. Bai Xiu was a bit unruly, but this time he didn't dodge. Bai Xiu's sword stabbed halfway, only leaving a small tip. Bai Xiu wanted to exert more force, but couldn't stab any further. "Why are you doing this?" Bai Xiu asked with a sorrowful expression. "You know what you're doing, you're making things very difficult for me." "Don't kill him," Phoenix's voice was firm. "If you want to kill me." Phoenix used her arm to block the tip of the sword. Her right arm was pierced through by the thunderclap sword. Bai Xiu held the thunderclap sword's hilt in his hand. The tip of the sword pierced through Phoenix's arm. The sharp silver tip glinted coldly, blood dripped along the lines of the blade. 1 drop, 2 drops, 3 drops. Finally, the blood dripped faster and faster, forming a thin red spring. The spring of blood flowed from Fang Yan's back. All of the blood from Phoenix's body dripped onto Fang Yan's body, soaking his clothes, and finally merging with Fang Yan's body. And Xiao, Bai Xiu's handsome face twitched slightly, his voice sorrowful. "This is a war." "I know, this is a war." Phoenix's face had a sorrowful smile. "You won. You are the victor of this war, so I can only ask you, please don't kill him." "That's impossible." Bai Xiu wanted to press the sword in his hand down. Phoenix took a step forward, pressing her back against Fang Yan's. Then, she pressed her chest against the tip of the sword that had pierced through her arm. If Bai Xiu wanted to stab Fang Yan to death, he could only continue to push the sword down, continue to pierce through Phoenix's arm, pierce through Phoenix's body, and only then could the sword pierce through Fang Yan's heart from the back. Very difficult. And a very long process. The muscles on Bai Xiu's face began to twitch, his voice filled with uncontrollable rage. "And Xiao, this is your decision. You are willing to die for him?" "I didn't die for him," Phoenix said. "If you don't kill me, I won't die, but if you kill me, I'll die. How could you do such a thing? How could you be so selfish?" Bai Xiu's patience was extremely strong, but at this moment, he was also tempted by this crazy woman to go on a killing spree. You know I can't kill you, I know, Phoenix's voice was filled with apology, so I can only beg you like this, let him go. You've already won. That's impossible, I can't let him go, then just kill me, Phoenix said. She looked at the sword in Bai Xiu's hand with her eyes that were red and swollen from crying and said, You only need to gently push the thunderclap sword down, kill me and then kill him, you bitch. Bai Xiu wanted to curse, wanted to call Phoenix a bitch, but the words couldn't come out no matter how hard he tried. He had never cursed anyone. He had never cursed Phoenix. And he would never curse Phoenix. After taking a few deep breaths, he did his best to suppress the ruthlessness in his heart and coldly said, Do you really think I don't dare to kill you? If you kill me, it'll be a kind of, Phoenix said with a smile, at least, the two of us will die together, this way, he won't be able to escape. When I was alive, I didn't get this kind of treatment. Chapter 583. The person I love the most. Hurts me the most. I don't have the right to choose. Tightly close the door to my heart, leaving behind a moment of tenderness. I'm afraid there's still a next life. Just like Zhang Yusheng's song, the person I love the most hurts me the most. If the person who attacked wasn't Bai Xiu, if the person begging wasn't Phoenix, how could such a painful and tangled scene have happened? Bai Xiu loved Phoenix, and it was because of this deep love that he was heartbroken by Phoenix's choice at this moment. Phoenix knew that Bai Xiu loved her, and it was because she knew he loved her that she made such a crazy decision. Either release Fang Yan, or kill her and Fang Yan together. Good people are human, bad people are human. Good people have feelings, bad people have feelings. Good people will be sad, bad people will be sad. At this moment, how cruel was this for Bai Xiu? Bai Xiu raised his sword, but he couldn't stab it down. Using the thunderclap sword to pierce the chest of the girl he liked, if he did such a thing, he would probably never be able to forgive himself. It would become a demon in his heart, and he would never be able to make any progress on the path of martial arts for the rest of his life. Letting Fang Yan go and helping Phoenix was equivalent to failing the mission. However, to kill Fang Yan, he had to kill Phoenix first, and Bai Xiu wasn't willing to bear such a result. With no choice, Bai Xiu was faced with a dilemma. The situation changed in an instant, blinding the old eyes of Kongzhu, Xiu Mu, and the others. While Fang Yan and Bai Xiu were fighting fiercely, Kongzhu used his King of Hell palm. The shadows of the palms flickered, and a cold wind blew. He struck out 81 palms in a row, each one aimed at vital acupoints on Fang Yan's body. However, before his palms could touch Fang Yan's body, Fang Yan was already lying in Bai Xiu's body. This was the difference in realm. Fang Yan and Bai Xiu exchanged a few quick blows. When Bai Xiu delivered the thunderclap sword to Fang Yan's hand and received the thunderclap sword energy that pierced through Fang Yan's body, Dabelo's move had just begun to show its power. In other words, Fang Yan and Bai Xiu's speed were several times faster than the others. Others could strike 3 times in a second, but the two of them could strike 30 times. However, when they hit the spot where Fang Yan was standing, all they could hurt was an afterimage. Xiu Mu's Arhat subduing demon fist also struck out at the same time. Fiery red clouds tore through the space, burning the air until it sizzled. The 18 chess pieces kept changing shapes in the air and finally turned into a pair of flying wings. Their wings flapped towards Fang Yan's Tianhai, Qitu, Lingshu, Yuhai, and other major acupuncture points. But by the time they landed, Fang Yan's body had already changed countless times. The chess piece would cut through the air and hit a tree trunk or a rock. Whoosh, 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 the chess piece passed through the tree trunk and continued to fly, disappearing into the rock. Everything was settled. When the two men in black caught Fang Yan's body with their proud spears and aimed at Fang Yan's head, Fang Yan had already collapsed weakly on top of Bai Xiu's body. The proud spears didn't fire any bullets. In the eyes of the two big men in black, Fang Yan had completely lost the ability to fight. There was no point in firing any more bullets. Moreover, the proud spear's bullets had extremely strong piercing abilities. If they pierced through Fang Yan's head, it would be a matter of course. If they accidentally pierced through Bai Xiu's body as well, then they would have to bear the consequences when they returned. The two men in black looked at each other and put away the proud spears in their hands. Obviously, Bai Xiu had already taken control of the situation. What they needed to do was to witness Bai Xiu's victory. They were also a little stunned in their hearts. They didn't expect Bai Xiu, this pretty boy, to be so skilled. They were all hardcore confidants of Jiang Junling and knew that Jiang Junling usually thought highly of himself and rarely really paid attention to anyone. When they saw Jiang Junling treat Bai Xiu with great courtesy, they were still a little unconvinced. They felt that the young master was being unfair to them. From the looks of it, the general's order was still very meaningful. Kongzhu stopped moving and didn't attack Fang Yan for no reason. Although Xiu Mu was full of unwillingness, he could only vent his anger on the rocks and trees under his feet. One of the old men in black robes put away his copper plate, and the other old man in black robes also stopped waving his chess pieces that could take someone's life. Everyone stopped and waited for Bai Xiu to end this battle. Everything would be over with just a light strike of the sword. Bai Xiu was the final victor, and this glory belonged to him alone. For Bai Xiu, this test had only just begun. He couldn't stab that sword. He could kill Fang Yan, but he couldn't kill Phoenix, the woman he deeply loved. This is the last time, Bai Xiu said in a low voice. Are you going to let him go? Phoenix asked with a face full of surprise. This is the last time I'll allow you to use this method to force me, Bai Xiu said. If a man wants to do something, a woman shouldn't interfere. That will make things difficult for the man. Although I like you very much, you can't use my love for you to threaten me. This makes me feel like a pitiful person. I'm sorry, Phoenix said with teary eyes. She knew that she had let down Fang Yan, and even more so, Bai Xiu. Her choice had hurt two people at the same time, one to the point of death, and the other to a life worse than death. See, you're saying sorry again, Bai Xiu smiled bitterly. Looks like you want to do something that will let me down again. As Bai Xiu spoke, he suddenly pulled out the long sword in his hand. Whoosh! The long sword brought out a flower of blood. The hole in Phoenix's arm was no longer blocked, and blood gushed out even more wildly. The blood splattered, staining Bai Xiu's clothes and Fang Yan's pale cheeks. Because of the excessive blood loss, Phoenix's body was getting weaker and weaker. When the long sword was pulled out of her arm, it also drained the remaining strength in her body. Her knees gave way and she almost fell to the ground. But she held on. Fang Yan was not out of danger, and Fang Yan's life was still uncertain, so she couldn't faint and definitely couldn't die. Bai Xiu, Phoenix panicked. Don't! Bai Xiu pulled out the long sword and had the chance to stab Fang Yan again. She couldn't let Bai Xiu hurt Fang Yan. She couldn't let Bai Xiu stab Fang Yan to death. Phoenix's arm was in so much pain that she couldn't lift it, so she could only use her body, her full chest, to take the initiative to receive Bai Xiu's Thunderclap sword. If Thunderclap was stained with her blood, Bai Xiu wouldn't be able to let it drink Fang Yan's blood, right? At least, she created a chance for Fang Yan. Fang Yan's body leaned weakly against Bai Xiu's chest, and it was precisely because of this that he could still stand after enduring Bai Xiu's murderous sword aura. Fang Yan's eyes were tightly shut, and the strength in his body had been drained. Consecutive battles, one conspiracy after another, had exhausted him both physically and mentally. What Bai Xiu stabbed into Fang Yan's body wasn't a long sword, but a sword aura that carried the power of thunder and lightning. The sword aura exploded inside his body, and his 5 viscera and 6 bowels and other vital organs were seriously damaged. His eyes were drowsy. He opened them again and again, and then closed them again and again. If he could die like this, it would be a kind of release. However, Fang Yan couldn't die. Although his body had no strength, although he couldn't open his eyes, his mind was still clear. He knew what was happening outside, and he could clearly hear the conversation between Bai Xiu and Phoenix, because he was so close to them, lying in Bai Xiu's arms, and then back to back with Phoenix. Their bodies were so close, but their hearts were so far apart. That idiot woman, that stupid woman, that selfish and unafraid of death, that cunning woman who was brave enough to sacrifice herself, that woman whom he hated to the bone, that unforgettable first love. This was a war, but she chose him at the end of it. She put her back to him, used his arm to block Bai Xiu's thunderclap sword, and said, "If you kill me, it will be a kind of help." She wanted to die with him, and she was willing to die with him. But why? Because of love? If it was because of love, why wasn't she willing to accept his feelings in the beginning? If it was because of love, why didn't she warn him in advance? If it was because of love, why did she participate in this sure-kill situation? Did she know that her appearance had already killed him once? It should be because of love. If not, why would she do such a thing to protect him? It should be love, right? If it wasn't love, why would she accompany an insignificant person to die? She loved me? Until now, Fang Yan couldn't believe this fact. Bai Xiu, let Fang Yan go, let Fang Yan go, Phoenix cried bitterly. This time, I'm sorry, I'm willing to use everything I have to make it up to you. Don't you want to marry me? Let's go back and get married, find a place with no one and live in seclusion. If you like Swallow Fort, we'll live in Swallow Fort for the rest of our lives and never come out again. Bai Xiu, let's not get involved in these things, let's go together. You stupid woman, what kind of phoenix are you? You're just a stupid bird. What right do you have to use my things to make a deal with me? Don't you know, the more you act like this, the more I want to kill him. Bai Xiu's expression became even more ferocious as he fiercely said, I just said, that was the last time I'll allow you to use such a method to force me. As Bai Xiu spoke, he suddenly thrust his sword towards Fang Yan's back. Phoenix didn't hesitate and forcefully thrust her chest forward. Bai Xiu's eyes turned cold. The sword in his hand didn't show any signs of stopping, but instead sped up again, stabbing towards Phoenix's chest. He wanted to pierce Phoenix with one strike. Then he would stab Fang Yan behind Phoenix to death. One sword, two birds. Two stupid birds. Chapter 584. When the Snake Lord opened his eyes, the world in front of him was dark. It was a moonless night. Even the farthest star in the sky was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps it couldn't bear to see the tragedies in this world, so it closed its eyes early to rest? The Snake Lord struggled, wanting to move his hands and feet, but he couldn't move his hands, nor could he move his feet. His body was poisoned, and it was a poison that he couldn't cure. How could the Snake Lord be poisoned? What a joke! Of course, the Snake Lord didn't laugh. He wanted to cry. He couldn't understand why his sister would treat him like this. Also, was that girl really his sister? The sister who wholeheartedly attached herself to him and took care of him? The sister who blinked her big eyes and said, "Big brother, it's time to eat." Just as he was thinking about this, a pair of bright eyes appeared in front of him. The pair of eyes rolled around, pure and bright, seemingly without any impurities. The Snake Lord's withered yellow eyes fixed on her, looking at the pair of eyes that he remembered deeply. Yes, these were his sister's eyes. In the past, he also found it very strange. He and his sister ate the same food, did the same things, and spent day and night with all kinds of poisonous snakes and animals. Why were his eyes black and yellow, and the whites of his eyes were bloodshot? They were like the eyes of a snake. But his sister's eyes were black and white. Her pupils were as black as ink, and the whites of her eyes were as white as the first snow. He could accept that the heavens were unfair to him. Even Mother Nature was so biased that it made people feel bitterly disappointed. The Snake Lord also wanted to be a quiet, handsome man. The Snake Lord opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "Do you want to talk?" the owner of the eyes asked. The Snake Lord didn't answer. He didn't need to answer such a question. The poison you were poisoned with is called red eccentric. It's made from the gallbladder of a red eccentric. The owner of the eyes explained softly, "You told me about this poison. You should have felt it. After being poisoned by red eccentric, your whole body is paralyzed, like a vegetable. Except for the brain, the rest of your body can't move, including your eyes." The Snake Lord's eyes were still staring at his sister, staring at the family that he missed day and night. The owner of the eyes looked at him for a while, sighed softly and said, "I know what you want to say." There was anger in the Snake Lord's eyes. He wanted to make the corners of his mouth twitch to express his disdain. However, he couldn't even do such a trivial action. How could she know what he wanted to say? Even he didn't know what he would say, so how could she know? Could she understand the pain and helplessness of watching one's only family being kidnapped and ordered around by others? Could she understand the indignation and humiliation of begging for a trade when one's life was about to end after failing a mission? Could she understand the cruelty and yearning of crying and begging her opponent to take her snake's eye and turn her into a snake slave without freedom and soul? The king of the snake species was still a king. Which king was not proud? I sacrificed everything and sold myself as a slave because I was concerned about your safety and longed for your gentleness. I wanted to live to see you one last time. Do you know all this? If you knew, why did you kill your brother when you met him again? I have raised countless snakes and developed countless poisons. I often test the poisons on my own body, but have I ever hurt you? It was as red as blood, and his heart was also bleeding. The snake lord felt sad, and his heart was throbbing with pain. Although many people thought that they had no heart, the owner of the eyes saw the change in the snake lord's eyes and said, I know you are angry, and I am angry with myself. I shouldn't have done this. I should have told you in advance, but I was worried that you wouldn't listen to me. I had no other choice. No other choice. These 4 words were so heartless, shameless, and irresponsible. Just because you said, no other choice, you poisoned your brother? When you were kidnapped, I had better choices, such as running away or hiding in the mountains, but I chose to listen to their orders and became a cruel killer. When I was defeated, I could choose to die or jump into the river, but I chose to sacrifice my eyes and become a snake slave. Slave. It was an insult to the snake monarch race that the snake monarch race was reduced to such a title. But he did it without hesitation. I can say that I had no other choice, but did I say that? You know, our natural enemies are those snake catchers, the owner of the eyes continued. I was hunted by the snake catchers. They should have dug out my eyes, but they didn't do that. They could have destroyed me, but they didn't. They trusted me and gave me freedom. The snake lord wanted to laugh, although he looked uglier when he laughed than when he didn't laugh. But he couldn't raise the corner of his mouth, and his face didn't show any extra expression. He was like a zombie. The only expression he could make was an expressionless face. In order to save you, I dug out my snake eyes and gave them away. Someone kidnapped you and only kept your snake eyes. Then, you became someone else's loyal servant. How cruel was this world? How unfair was it? Brother, the owner of the eyes gently touched the snake lord's face and said, Rest well. I won't hurt you. A single tear appeared in his eye, then slid down his cheeks. Wasn't this kind of damage considered as damage? Brother, seeing the snake lord's tears, the owner of the eyes finally panicked. She wiped the tears from the snake lord's face and said, Brother, don't cry. I can't let you go, otherwise he'll be angry. Do you want to talk? Let me talk with you, okay? The owner of the eyes took out a pill from her pocket. She took half of the pill and put it in the snake lord's mouth. Brother, this is half of the antidote. Even if you take the antidote, you'll only recover half of your strength, the owner of the eyes warned him. Don't even think about running away, otherwise I'll beat you down again. As soon as the antidote entered his throat, his body felt refreshed. The snake lord's burning body eased a bit. He could feel his eyeballs moving, then his hands and feet could move. The snake lord's tears flowed even faster. His voice was hoarse like sand rubbing against each other as he asked, Why? Brother, why? Brother, he's the most handsome man in the world, as well as the most charismatic man. He's like my brother to me. At this moment, the snake lord's heart was dead. That man is the most handsome man in the world, the most charismatic man in the world. That man is like my brother. Then, what am I? Brother, don't be angry, okay? I don't want you to get hurt. I'll protect you. Once this is over, I'll take you to see him. He's a really, really good person. He'll take good care of you. The owner of the eyes spoke with concern. When the time comes, I'll ask him to help me take back your snake's eye. He'll definitely agree. He's a very capable person. He'll never break his promise. Kill me, the snake lord said. Brother, I'll say, the Snake Lord gathered all his strength and roared at the owner of the eyes, "Kill me!" At this moment, his heart was dead. It's said that when a person is close to death, they'll experience a moment of lucidity before death. Fang Yen felt like he was about to die, because his body's current condition was very strange. When Bai Xiu stabbed his chest with the thunderclap sword Qi, his Tai Chi heart suddenly stopped, and the Tai Chi domain also disappeared. It was like when you were driving but the car ran out of gas. It was like when you were watching TV, but the electricity went out in your house. This was the same situation as 3 years ago. The Tai Chi heart once again became a dead fetus. Ever since he comprehended the Tai Chi heart, it had become a part of Fang Yan's body. For him, the Tai Chi heart was one of the most important organs in his body, second only to the vital organ between his legs. However, now that this important part had disappeared, it was as if the body had suddenly lost its limbs, which was hard to accept. Maybe I'm really going to die, Fang Yen dejectedly thought. The elders of Swallow Dock were right, I'm still not as good as Bai Xiu. While Fang Yen was in complete despair, the Tai Chi heart once again spun. When the Tai Chi heart died, the extreme yang energy quickly decreased and disappeared. The core of the Tai Chi heart lost its ability to resist, and the vicious and violent energy that had gathered around the Tai Chi heart in the past instantly filled the core. The Tai Chi heart spun again, and it was even more violent than before. It was like a tank without brakes, more like a plane that had lost control. Rumble, they whooshed, carrying a faint crimson glow. Fang Yen could clearly see that his Tai Chi heart had turned black. A black Tai Chi heart, this was the first time Fang Yen saw it. And the first time he knew of its existence. Black Tai Chi. Whoosh, the sword in Bai Xiu's hand stabbed straight at Phoenix's chest. Stabbed at her heart. Help her, let her die together with the person she loved. Fang Yen. Phoenix closed her eyes in despair, subconsciously calling out Fang Yan's name. She knew that she was really going to die. There was a smile of relief on her face. The feeling of death was really good. Whoosh, Bai Xiu's sword pierced through Phoenix's chest. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.